Today's story is literally Korean Jujutsu Kaisen. We have shamans, curses, and good fights. The only difference is that the protagonist is a Megumin instead of a Itadori, but I assure you that the guy is good. In this story, all kinds of negative emotions can accumulate, giving life to creatures known as malevolent spirits. They are invisible to normal people, but bring death or even excruciating pain. Sometimes they are threatening on catastrophic scales. Few humans can naturally prevent them. Only exorcists are capable of this, still present today, but disguised. A boy holds a phone and informs his uncle that he has arrived. A crowd observes a dead man. The malevolent spirit has already fled, and only a few clues remain. The boy named Go Pungrim informs that he did what he could and now it's up to his uncle, and asks if he forgot. Leaning on a long sword, he holds the phone and says it's already time to go to school. He asks if he thinks high school is something silly, like him. Down below, in the crowd, a man with red hair catches the boy's attention. As he covers his head with a hood, he wonders why that face looks familiar, but he decides to let it go and climbs down from the wall where he was. The red-haired man is smoking a cigarette. Someone calls for the agent. It's already the 8th victim in the Heart of Soul, and just like the previous victims in the Beast incident, there are no common traits. The wall is painted with red liquid and signs of a struggle. It seems it really was a vengeful spirit. The dark-haired man is scared and wonders if it wouldn't be better to call an exorcist or shaman. He tells the red-haired man that Go's nephew can see ghosts, but the red-haired man says he doesn't care about those superstitious things. The dark-haired man insists that it could be of great help and that he can help solve the cases. Gong Pungrim is at school packing his things, and someone asks if he's leaving. A boy says they are going to play ball and asks if he wants to join, but he says he has work to do. The protagonist always runs off when his uncle calls, and the boy says he can count on his fingers how many times they played together. And he also hasn't submitted his career research that the teacher asked for. So Gong sits down and starts filling out a form quickly. He hands it to his classmate and asks him to complete it. On the form, he only filled out that he wants to be a salaried employee, but wrote nothing else beyond that. As Gong leaves the classroom, his friend warns him that it will probably be changed, and asks if there's really nothing he wants to do. But he continues on his path without even looking back, thinking in his head that it doesn't matter. He passes by the other students at school living their normal lives, and Gong knows that he has never lived his life the way he truly wanted, not once. In a landscape filled with trees and bushes, a small river cuts through the area. We see a modern building with very large windows. Pungrim is walking and passes by a parked white car. He asks his uncle if they have visitors since there's a different car parked there. His uncle is accompanied, calls him, and says he arrived at the right time. The man in green asks if he is Pungrim and approaches. The protagonist recognizes him as the police officer from earlier, and the guy approaches saying he has changed a lot since they last met. Scratching the back of his neck, Pungrim says there must be some mistake because he doesn't remember having met him before. Then the man explains that they used to play a lot when he was much younger, which is why he wouldn't remember. He tells him that he is the younger brother of Pungrim's father, meaning he is his uncle. This information shocks the protagonist, who has flashes of memory from his childhood, and someone saying that this man would ruin the family. Strange people with malevolent looks saying various things about the poor little boy. An elderly woman lamenting and clutching a portrait, wondering why someone like that was born into the family. The poor little boy cries and says that he is not like this. It is the monster inside him. People start to hold him and pull him away from his uncle. He screams, calling for him. He says that his uncle knows he is not like this, and begs his uncle to help him. But his uncle Leit turns his back and decides not to help. These memories make him remember that this is really his uncle. And with a stern expression, he asks what that man wants with him. The other uncle is just laughing, watching everything, and says that he is disqualified for this. Leit shouts for him to be quiet and says that he will interrogate him separately later, because it is very suspicious to raise a child in that place. The man with white hair asks why he is only looking for the boy now, asking if he suddenly missed his nephew, and casting a serious look at the man, he asks if he came to ask for Pungrim's help for the investigation. Pungrim asks if anyone has helped him lately, since he saw the clues to the Beast incident through the boy. It seems that this power the boy has, which was rejected and seen as threatening, is now necessary. Trying to apologize, Leit explains that he heard his sister-in-law had traveled and no one knew the boy's whereabouts. But lowering his head still filled with resentment, Pungrim says he has nothing to say to that man, and turning his back on his uncle, the protagonist continues on his way, followed by the man with white hair. The two walk together, and the man holding the fan looks back a few times. He gets close to Pungrim and tries to be kind, saying that he must have gone through complicated situations, and then he asks him what he decided to do. With a gentle look, he asks if Pungrim already knows the whereabouts of the culprit. The protagonist continues with a deadpan expression, showing no emotion. Night falls. It is a beautiful full moon night. In a police station, a man asks if the officer is not going to leave work. Leit explains that he is about to leave, and the other man says he will leave first, but if he sees any ghosts, he should call his nephew. Angrily, the man replies that things don't work that way. Time passes and he remains in the office, alone, observing all the files. There is no progress in the investigation, which is why he feels this way. He shouldn't have gone after Pundrim, but Detective Park insisted. He questions what the boy could actually help with. Even with rumors circulating, everyone is quite sensitive about the death of his brother. And now that they had that meeting, he probably hates his own uncle, so it's better to get back to work. Speaking of which, he takes a look at the autopsy results and sees that they couldn't detect any signs of tools or objects. How is it possible that they managed to twist and pull the neck like a bottle cap? And a very bad feeling runs through Leit's body. He feels a sinister chill. He feels as if there is something on his neck and puts his hand on the spot. Then that feeling makes him uneasy. He stays alert to his surroundings, and he looks to the side in hopes of seeing something. But again, that sensation on his neck. He puts his hand there again. He wonders why he is feeling that chill right on his neck. Looking at the monitor, he thinks that maybe he is feeling this because he just saw the autopsy results. But upon looking more closely at the screen, he can see a supernatural hand holding his head. And when he looks up, he realizes that he is not alone, but a bizarre being is right above him. Leit is pulled up completely, knocking papers over and letting out a scream. As he stares at the hideous face of that creature, he wonders if it is a monster or a hallucination. And with the desperation of that situation, he begins to feel his throat. The door of the place he is in opens quickly, and Pundrim appears, jumping towards where the monster is holding the poor man. He places both hands on the back of the aberration. With a thrust, he delivers a precise kick to the creature's head, causing it to release Leit. The man falls to the ground, now free from the clutches of the apparition. Holding his neck, Leit asks how the boy got there. The boy asks him not to keep asking questions. While looking around, he asks if his uncle wants to capture the culprit. The monster approaches, with huge red teeth. Pundrim says that the culprit is right there, in front of him. Incredulous, Leit asks what he means, and begins to sweat with fear. The bizarre monster is approaching the protagonist, and Leit thinks he doesn't want to capture the culprit at the cost of his nephew's life. But the man is paralyzed with fear. His legs won't move, and he screams for Pundrim to run away. The devil opens his mouth full of teeth and lunges at the boy. Our protagonist now holds a sword, his eyes shining a different color. As he adjusts his sword, he explains that these creatures feed on emotions. Leit is still paralyzed, sweating and terrified like a baby. Looking at his uncle, Pundrim says that just as students and police officers have their duties, this is the duty he has. The creature screams shrill and moves even closer to the boy. With the sword in position, the boy prepares. And with a simple movement, he finishes off the creature. Leit quickly gets up and runs to his nephew, asking if he is okay or hurt. With a dry and unenthusiastic expression, he says he is fine. Looking around, the police officer realizes that the place is a mess, completely destroyed. With an awkward smile, he says it's no problem. At least the boy is okay. But then he notices the boy's expression and asks why he looks like that. Pundrim says he did everything he asked and that he doesn't need to pretend to be concerned since he was absent for years anyway. Leit turns his back to tidy up the place and starts trying to change the subject. But another voice interrupts their conversation. Someone steps on the shards on the floor. The man with white hair says it would be good to clean up a bit. He explains that reinforcements will arrive soon and that it's better for Leit to come with them. With his arms crossed and smiling, the mysterious man says he seems to have many questions. The police officer looks a bit worried, but the man says he deserves explanations. And while the man points with his fan, Leit asks him to be straightforward. The culprit behind the beast incident he was hunting was an anomaly that the mysterious man was taking care of. Clenching his teeth, Leit asks confusedly what he means by an anomaly. They are entities born from the dark side of humans, usually called demons but resembling monsters. Crossing his arms, the police officer reflects on the new information. But he finds all of this very strange. Monsters are usually from fantasy stories. These demons feed on human emotions, and there are those who have the power to confront them. Like our Pundrim, the boy who just demonstrated his powers. He is exceptionally powerful, even among other exorcists, which is why he couldn't hide his abilities when he was little. Then Leit starts to remember the past when Pundrim was tiny and said he had a monster under his bed. But the man didn't take his nephew's complaints seriously and teased him. Despite that, when he said there was a monster under the bed, the uncle would go check. But little Pundrim would say he wouldn't be able to. And once again, now as an adult, the boy said that again. His uncle can't. While thinking about everything he is hearing, Leit asks one more thing. He points his finger at the mysterious man with white hair and strange clothes and asks who he is. Embracing Pundrim, he says he is like a father to him, is also an exorcist, and is the head of the order. Leit asks if exorcists are like Taoist priests, and the man says it's kind of like that. For the police officer, this kind of thing doesn't make sense, but since he saw it with his own eyes, he can't help but believe. Pungrim says he will check ahead. The man with white hair wishes him to sleep well, but Leit asks him to wait a bit, and somewhat awkwardly, he wishes goodnight to his nephew. The man thinks they should improve the relationship between uncle and nephew. Pungrim is sitting at a desk fiddling with some stones. He holds his head with one hand and moves the little stones with the other, looking a bit bored. Then he starts pointing his finger at a round stone, and that stone suddenly transforms into a sculpture resembling a little bunny. The boy observes it with serious eyes and little expression. He taps the sculpture, which now looks like a human face, and it spins. But suddenly he punches it with his fist, destroying the stone. He shouts that he can't concentrate on his studies because of him. Leit feels his ear burn, as if someone is talking about him. Discontent, Pungrim wonders what family ties mean and what kind of joke that is. He stacks several stones one on top of the other, forming a tower. And he thinks that even though it is a biological relationship, it can be destroyed so easily. It may seem solid, but in the end, he is alone and can only trust himself. Looking at his arms, we can see that the boy has several scars, and he knows that things nowadays are different from when his father was present, and there was nothing to worry about. The door opens and a dark-haired man enters, calling for Pungrim. He says he thought he was sleeping and asks if he made all this juice for daddy, but the little boy replies no and stretches out his arms asking to be held. He says the juice is for the visitor, and the man asks his wife who they will be receiving today, but she says no one is coming. Laughing, the man asks if it's for the imaginary friend, the rabbit or the bear, but the irritated little boy says he is not imaginary. The man feels the force of the little boy's punch, putting his hand to his face. Pointing outside, the little boy says the visitors are already out there. His father turns around still holding him and looks in the direction he pointed. A huge red eye is staring at them through the window. The protagonist wakes up from this sinister nightmare in shock. He is lying in his bed and breathes slowly to recover. The daylight enters through the window, brightening the room. It is a new day in the city. People walk by living their lives. Our protagonist rubs his eyes, still a bit sleepy. He wonders why he is having these dreams from when he was younger again. Pungrim thinks it might be the presence of his uncle pretending to care and turning his routine upside down. But he believes that if he helps him a little, he will probably leave him alone soon. And anyway, the man with white hair promised that he could stop being an exorcist when he became an adult. As the boy walks to school, someone bumps into him. He apologizes, as he got distracted. But then when he pays more attention to who bumped into him, he sees that it is a strange girl, who didn't even look back after bumping into him. His friend comes close and asks if the girl didn't seem troubled in some way. Pungrim punches his friend in shock and he says he didn't think he would take it so seriously. That girl is Jean Chai-rin from the first class. Her sister left the game on her own a few days ago. They weren't very close. As she is a prodigy, she ended up belittling her sister for being useless. With a look of disdain, Pungrim wonders how his friend knows all this. But he believes that even without being very close, losing a family member must be heavy. The protagonist begins to reflect on his friend's words and what losing a family member can mean. Pungrim starts to believe that it is because of suffering these losses that other people are sometimes so nosy. They walk behind the girl who continues walking hunched over, kind of looking at the ground. But looking closely at the reflection beside her, one can see an obsessive creature walking alongside her. The creature has long black hair, red marks on its body, and seems to be guiding the girl. Back at the house of the mysterious man with white hair, he explains to Pungrim that they have a visitor at home today. He thinks that lately many visitors have been coming. A desperate man screams that he needs help very much, placing his hands on a table. He puts his hand on his heart and asks them to save his youngest daughter Chiron. The light-haired man asks them to calm down first. Gathering the letter of termination of life and belongings of his eldest daughter, the father hands the things to the exorcists. Pungrim is serving coffee to the visitors and hears that Chiron has been acting strange since her sister's death, but it has been getting worse. Then they realized it was not just simple depression. The girl doesn't even seem like herself anymore. The exorcist asks for more examples of the girl's actions. The father explains that she does not respond when they talk to her. She just keeps practicing gymnastics non-stop. Even when they try to stop her, they can't. The mother tries to hold her daughter, but she simply falls, as if she has fallen apart. And it really seems that her body is not under her control. Her gaze is empty like that of a corpse. They have already tried to take her to the hospital, but they said there is nothing wrong with her, so this is the last place they can trust. The exorcist continues reading the letter attentively. The letter seems to carry a heavy feeling of guilt and inadequacy. The girl apologizes for being incompetent over and over again. Then, raising his hand and smiling, the exorcist explains that they will do their best to resolve this situation. The parents don't even know how to thank him, crying with emotion and expressing their gratitude many times. With a very reassuring smile, the light-haired man says he has seen cases like this before, so they don't need to worry too much. Pungrim's eyes go straight to the letter, and he thinks about what it means to be incompetent, and about how many times she repeated the phrase, "I'm sorry for being incompetent." Then the exorcist talks to the protagonist, and says that based on the content of the letter, it seems that the sister died because of this incompetence, and that since Pungrim attends the same school as Chiron, it seems like a call from God for them to help save her. Then the exorcist asks the boy to do him a favor, and during class he approaches the girl. He watches her from a distance as she holds a potted plant, and he has no doubt. Based on the letter, he is sure that the demon that killed her sister is this very incompetence. In contrast, Jean Chiron is super promising and successful, so she is far from this so-called incompetence. The phone starts ringing, breaking the silence. It's Leit calling to ask if he has a moment, and Pungrim asks if any other strange cases have occurred. The man, with a frightened expression, asks if his nephew is really a shaman. He then explains that there have been 6 cases of server disconnection in the last 3 days. Leit says he tried to talk to Gwakyryung first, but he said it's the boy who handles that department. Normally, demons move on to the next victim who has similar emotions, and it's strange for the girl to be affected just for being a sister. In any case, Pungrim believes that another demon also intervened in this case. Leit asks if there's no chance it's the same bastard. Maybe it's just an illusion. But the protagonist notices a different movement, and says he needs to hang up. Several people are close to Chiron, making malicious comments about her. The boy senses this different aura, everyone acting strangely, and begins to approach. As Chiron walks, 2 girls come up to her and say to each other that she couldn't compete even if she had a broken leg. Pungrim shouts for Jean Chiron to be careful. The girl looks back with that empty and strange gaze. But before she can move, an arm stretches out to her, and pushes her mercilessly down the stairs, causing her to drop the potted plant. One of the girls who was behind her on the stairs is responsible for such a horrible act. The pot flies far away, spilling some dirt along the way. But a very agile figure with purple hair passes by the 2 girls, and rushing down the steps, manages to reach Chiron, holding her carefully so she doesn't fall down the stairs. The pot ends up falling and breaking into several pieces, but the girl is safe. The figure with purple hair is apparently a girl who managed to save Chiron just in time. Regaining her composure, the girl says they should be careful because it's dangerous to play near the stairs. The 2 girls who are behind Chiron are trembling and wonder who this girl is. They whisper to each other if she isn't the girl who was transferred to class 6 yesterday. Her name is Lee So-mang. Pungrim sneaks a little to try to see what happened and manages to spot So-mang. He goes to the top of the stairs to check on Chiron. But when the girl passes by him, she warns him not to interfere. With a serious look, Pungrim addresses her, asking what she said. But smiling, the girl says it's because she is the one who will take care of this. He asks what she means by that, but she ignores him and keeps walking. So-mang continues on her way as if nothing happened, without looking back. The protagonist can't quite understand what that girl meant. Pungrim's friend is in Kenda uniform and asks if he isn't going home. The boy is leaning against the wall and sitting, with a discouraged expression, and says yes. His friend asks what happened for him to be so distant since early on. But Pungrim's gaze is directed at Chiron, who is practicing her exercises. The boy's friend ends up interpreting that he is interested in her. He blushes, and Pungrim asks him to stop talking nonsense. The boy is lost in thought, wondering if that girl with purple hair is also a demon hunter. If so, this is the first time he encounters a demon hunter who is his age. Putting his hand on his face, he wonders why he is so bothered by this. And then he realizes that quite some time has passed and the girl is already leaving. Pungrim asks his friend to go ahead, and starts to get up. Then he is quite convinced that the boy is interested in her. The protagonist begins to follow the girl, asking where she is going. It is already dark, and Chiron continues on her way, unaware that she is being followed. Pungrim is being very careful not to be noticed by her, moving slowly. She then quickly turns a corner, going out of sight. He decides to quicken his pace so he doesn't lose her. But upon turning the same corner as the girl, he realizes that she has mysteriously disappeared. Not much time has passed, and he came right behind her. He doesn't understand where she could have gone. But then a piercing scream catches his attention. He starts running, imagining that it could be a trap. He recognizes that voice as Jean Charon's and shouts her name while running. The boy hurries as fast as he can, leaping in the direction he heard the noise. But when he arrives at the location, he is surprised. The student from before is in a fighting stance, and seems to have punched Chiron. Several people are on the ground. She looks back and sees Pungrim, asking if he is still around. While Chiron is still down, she says she told him to stop interfering, but it seems he didn't listen, and from Charon's body emerges a horrendous creature. So-mang says that since he is there, he can quietly watch the show. The boy is surprised by her bold attitude. He knows that many exorcists tend to go overboard, but he thinks it's absurd that she has harmed innocents. He wonders if this brat is someone who really shouldn't be messed with. Even falling a bit behind, Pungrim stands up and takes a battle stance. He moves a little closer to the girl slowly, and in a matter of seconds she moves away from him, quickly retreating. Pungrim is confused when he hears her say that this is useless. Even though he is well prepared to fight, it won't be enough. With a somewhat sly expression, she says that since it would just be a waste of effort, she ends the matter there. So-mang screams and struggles, asking to be let go. Pungrim is dragging the girl by her clothes, asking her if all of this was just to show off, but now she has backed down. With tears in her eyes, she says she didn't expect the spirit to be so disgusting. Full of slimy legs that keep moving, it looks like a spider. She can barely look at it without feeling nauseous. Putting his hand on the back of his neck, the boy repeats what she had said before, telling him not to interfere because she could handle it. The sudden loss of courage leaves the protagonist quite disappointed. But while the two are talking, a blow from the bizarre spirit suddenly interrupts them. So-mang barely manages to dodge, falling to the side and avoiding being hit. Pungrim manages to grab some of the unconscious people on the ground and protect them. But then, when he turns his eyes back to the enemy, he is startled. He remembers that spiders are not considered insects, but rather arthropods, and this only frustrates the girl even more. But casting a charming glance at the protagonist, she explains that if he finds a cute girl in danger, he has a duty to help her. And the boy looks dumbfounded upon hearing her call herself cute. But at least he finds one thing to feel more at ease. If she can attack the malevolent spirit, then it means it isn't that powerful after all. As he prepares his sword, he thinks that he wouldn't want to lay hands on the enemy without first knowing what emotions it was born from. Every spirit has its own way of being defeated, and this one has a human face, resembling someone he knows. It reminds him of Jean Chiron, but perhaps a bit more mature. And then Pungrim remembers having seen a picture of her older sister, and she and the spirit are indeed very similar. He also recalls that the feeling that fed it was incompetence, and that this spirit must take on the face of its target. So-mang interrupts the boy's thoughts by launching herself at him, asking if he heard what she said. He tries to free himself from the forced embrace, and crying, the girl asks what he was thinking for so long. The spirit has vanished, and she was trying to say that she heard a sound of something crawling on the roof. Pungrim notices that it is suddenly getting much darker. He is also hearing something strange. Worried, he quickly turns to look at what is behind him, and stuck to his clothes, he notices a kind of web. It's as if the place has suddenly been taken over by this web, and he is impressed. That's why it was so dark. All the windows were covered by this web, and there is no sign of the malevolent spirit. He also can't move anymore and shouts for the girl to do something. But she is all wrapped up in a cocoon of webs, more immobilized than he is. Furious, he says that this wouldn't have happened if she had taken care of everything from the beginning. Then Pungrim gives the girl a lecture, saying that she should have let him handle it if she knew she wouldn't be able to. She needs to understand that an exorcist has the duty to protect the lives around him. Unable to bear hearing any more lectures, the girl screams that she also wants to catch that thing and that he is not the only frustrated one there. While still stuck to the wall, the boy is annoyed by her scream. And suddenly, in the middle of the courtyard, Chiron appears, illuminated by a spotlight. The two exorcists don't understand what is happening there. So-mang remembers perfectly knocking the girl out, but she is there awake. She starts to move, but it really seems like she is completely soulless at that moment. The girl begins to move like a professional gymnast, getting closer until she is right next to Pungrim, and she throws a strong punch towards his face. He barely dodges it. This leaves her hand completely injured, and the exorcist is shocked by what he sees. He continues to dodge the attacks, shouting for her to stop because she is going to break her hand. But even with her hand completely wrecked, the girl continues without hesitation. Looking more closely, he notices that the girl's hand is being controlled by webs. He doesn't know how to act. He can't use his strength since his hands and legs are tied. He could also burn those spider webs because they are made of fine metals, like a jigsaw. He urgently needs to think of a way out of this. Then, thinking of something, our protagonist calls out to So-mang. The boy asks if she can cut those webs since her golden ability is more powerful than that. It turns out that each exorcist has powers from one of the 5 elements. Some use them as physical strength, and others with tool transformation. Exceptionally, there are cases where an exorcist has more energy, but those are rare cases. Each spirit has characteristics based on the emotion in which they were born. Once the hunter understands this characteristic, it becomes easier to defeat them. If the hunter approaches the spirit without understanding this, they may end up losing or suffering serious injuries. In the case of this spirit, the power is a sharp spider web, so So-mang's powers to increase physical strength would be very useful. She assumes that she can indeed deal with those webs but asks if he doesn't want to take all the credit once she frees him. Pungrim asks how she will fight alone with a creature she finds so disgusting that she can barely get close. And he warns that Charon's body won't hold up much longer. Then the girl convinces herself and uses her power to transform her arm and tear the web cocoon. Concentrating all her power in her fist, she stares intently at the enemy. And she says that this is for snooping on someone else's schemes, and quickly she manages to destroy all the traps. Looking back, she shouts that she did what he asked, so if he loses, she won't just stand by. And sarcastically, the protagonist replies that it's not her, and that she should watch the show quietly where she is. He looks at the ceiling and can see the spirit, which believes that hiding in the dark is an advantage. But it will be no advantage against our boy, who prepares for the strike. He leaps towards the spirit stuck to the ceiling, with his sword ready. That movement leaves So-mang impressed. Her eyes shine, and the boy's sword begins to shine brightly, illuminating the entire place. As it shines, he prepares a precise cut that slices through the monster's abdomen. The malevolent spirit screams in agony as it is hit by the attack, and that light becomes so strong that it makes So-mang unable to see a foot in front of her. Pungrim finishes the attack, posing on the ground still holding his sword. The spirit detaches from the ceiling and begins to fall as well. But even with a huge cut in its abdomen, the creature doesn't stop and charges at the boy with its enormous legs. He realizes that this creature is indeed strong, completely contrasting with being incompetent. Now he believes he can understand how the creature came to be, but he can't grasp what it is doing. In any case, he questions who has never felt this kind of emotion, feeling so helpless that they want to die. And Pungrim manages to make a horizontal cut, splitting the spirit's body in half. The cut is clean, quick, and precise, slicing through the air. Pungrim sheathes his sword while the spirit is split in two. Looking at So-mang with his yellow eyes, he asks her to wait. He asks her not to dare leave and feels like he is there, reminding her of her mother giving orders. The boy says he is trying to hear her apologies, even though he doesn't feel like talking either. He wants to know the details of how she knew about the spirit, so he can explain it to the clients. Pointing at him, she asks if the spirit they hunted wasn't an inferior complex. And with a puzzled expression, he says he can't believe she didn't know. But then the girl decides to start explaining everything from the beginning. She was an exorcist serving in Taejun and came to the location to locate this inferior complex spirit. It was a tough time because of the battle against that spirit. These malevolent spirits tend to target humans overwhelmed by extreme emotions, like the incompetent one, seeking someone at the peak of helplessness. But that's not the case with inferior complexes, which instead of making people their targets, they cling to them. So the person the spirit clung to wasn't Jin Chai-hwa, but her younger sister, who was the target of comparison. At another moment, she remembers her colleagues saying that there must be at least 1 or 2 people in conflict with the spirit's target. They wonder if it would be the less experienced coworker or a high school classmate. Meanwhile, So-mang just observes everything from a higher spot. Her colleagues are strict in saying that she isn't helping and hasn't helped at all since she arrived. She had a bad reputation among her peers for bringing bad luck whenever they encountered malevolent spirits, but she believes there is no one better than her of her age. She decided to come alone to Seoul in search of this inferior complex to prove that she can defeat one with her own strength, and also to make those colleagues who spoke ill of her eat their words. But Pungrim ended up taking that away from her. So besides being there without telling her associates, she still hasn't completed it. Therefore, with no more hope, she asks for help from the protagonist. With teary eyes, she says she will help him catch the incompetent spirit. Pungrim continues with that fed-up expression while she insists. He believes that being so audacious is a talent in itself, and asks why he should help her. She looks puzzled, and he says it's more fascinating to see that she thinks her help is useful to him. The order he received from the client was to help Chiron, so he doesn't care about the inferior complex she mentioned. Moreover, he says he has nothing to gain from it, but the girl interrupts him and says he does. Making a sad face, she says he would gain the trust of a pretty girl. Crying and kneeling on the ground, she says she will give him a month's allowance. Then memories of having attacked innocents, being scared of the spirit for being disgusting, and crying come to Pungrim's mind. He turns to her and asks if there is any way to know where this incompetent spirit is. So-mang becomes hopeful and asks if he likes her, but he doesn't appreciate the joke. She stands up and says she doesn't know for sure, but asks if he saw the news today. He denies it, and she tells him that the news has been everywhere. Then the protagonist remembers to check his phone and realizes he has some missed calls. Leit sent a news report about a woman's attempted self-elimination and several messages for him. Pungrim looks surprised to see so many messages he hadn't responded to. He had been so busy with Charon's case that he forgot to check his phone. Pungrim already knew he would have to find his uncle again, but considering having to gather this girl and his uncle in the same place at the same time, it means there will be a meeting of 3 people at once, and that raises the boy's pressure. He shouts for So-mang to take care of Chiron and the people she knocked out, and leaves the place. In another large and beautiful building, we see the Cross Cafe. The protagonist and his newest partner, against his will, are having a drink. He looks at some cards while she is distracted sucking on her straw. The cafe door opens quickly and someone enters the place. This catches So-mang's attention as she looks in the direction of the person who entered. She nudges Pungrim and says that if there is a spirit for fatigue, that guy will be its first target. But the person is Leit, who greets the two young people and approaches them. He asks if that young lady is a friend of Pungrim, and he says he thinks so, mentioning that she is the exorcist he mentioned earlier. The girl is annoyed by the way he introduced her. She introduces herself as a rising star of the time with great skill and beauty. But cutting to the point, Leit asks if they want to order something first, mentioning that the sweets there have a great reputation. Pungrim interrupts his uncle and says that they don't have much time and are there for work. The girl doesn't understand why the atmosphere is so heavy if they are nephew and uncle. He shows the letter and the victim's biodata. She mentioned incompetence just like the last letter. And during the rescue, she seemed to be in an unstable mental state. She appeared to have no will, but looking at her medical records, there was nothing wrong with her body. Fortunately, she didn't have any other dangerous actions after the attempt but is safe in the hospital being monitored. And they are quite lucky because they found a suspicious target. The police can't provide all the necessary help, and the young lady also says she would love to help. She praises Leit, saying he looks like a police officer straight out of the movies. Pungrim sighs while So-mang continues talking about her uncle. She says he even smells like cigarettes like the police officers. He becomes worried and says he used a lot of deodorant, causing the girl to laugh. The two continue their relaxed conversation, but Pungrim interrupts them. With a grim face, he says that just keeping in touch with the target is enough, as this is not something a normal person can handle, and that everything he has said so far could have been said over the phone. So what is the reason for the meeting? Joining his hands and making a sad face, the uncle says there is no particular reason. Leit apologizes and says he would like to see his nephew's face from time to time. Moreover, the boy is doing a very dangerous job, so he can't help but worry. But Pungrim doesn't let his heart soften and says that because of his uncle's whim, the target might have died at that moment. He continues bombarding his uncle with sharp words, and So-mang gets angry at his attitude. With a cutting look, he says that they both only care about their skills, so the least they can do is not get in the way. Then he ends the tense atmosphere by asking to go to the bathroom. The air becomes so heavy that even silence seems to scream. She is furious and says she would like to flush him down the toilet, but Leit asks her to be patient with the boy. He explains that Pungrim finds it hard to trust people, especially adults, but he was a brilliant child. Then Leit lowers his head and apologizes on behalf of his nephew, as he is the reason he has become this way. Even knowing the risks of this job, he still put his nephew in the position he is in today. Now, more aware of the story, So-mang understands that the situation is indeed very heavy. But the police officer says he is happy that his nephew has made a good friend who is also an exorcist. It's a shame he can't do anything to change the situation, but he asks the girl to take care of Pungrim. Although he seems like a very skilled exorcist, he is not all that he appears to be, and in the bathroom, Pungrim can't control the tears running down his face. Deep down, he is just a sensitive and delicate child. A message appears saying that the patient's condition is not bad and they were able to reduce the staff. Pungrim is having a juice while reading the messages on his phone. He is impressed by his uncle's speed and insistence on keeping in touch even after what he did in the cafe. But on one hand, he thinks it's better this way than having to walk on eggshells. The boys in the protagonist's room ask him to join them in a game of dodgeball. He says that his body isn't in shape right now, and that maybe later he will join. This makes him think about the last time he played dodgeball in his life. But he believes it wouldn't be very fair for him to join since his skills are different from those of his peers. Pungrim is convinced that exorcists shouldn't be allowed to participate in these games, since they would have to focus on not using all their strength, which can be tiring. The boys are still talking among themselves trying to find another member, and the protagonist continues to think that sometimes he feels envious seeing people fitting well into the routine. A loud shout saying, "Final blow," reaches the ears of everyone nearby. So-mang is holding the dodgeball and ready to throw it with all her might. She manages to hit 3 unfortunate souls in one go, and she celebrates happily for achieving such a feat. The protagonist observes that he is perplexed that she doesn't care at all about measuring her strength. Pungrim discreetly gets up and steps on the ground, releasing a lightning bolt that goes to So-mang's feet. While she is distracted asking for the ball, the lightning reaches her and forms a small stone in her path, which makes her trip and fall face first to the ground. Everyone around becomes concerned. She is still on the ground, but as she gets up, she seems to understand what happened. Furious, the girl comes to argue with Pungrim asking if he wants to fight her. Cynically, the boy makes a pitying face and asks why she didn't go to the infirmary after a fall like that. This reaction leaves the girl speechless, and he adds that he will take her there. He says that her face looks a bit messed up, and she asks if she hurt her face. So unexpected is Pungrim's attitude that she asks if he ate something spoiled. She screams at the top of her lungs that there is no need for that, but he insists on taking her. Now the girl has a bandage stuck right in the middle of her forehead. It was indeed Pungrim who put it on because the nurse is always sleeping due to a hangover, but that's not why he brought her there. He tells her that his uncle contacted him, and the girl perks up at that. Tonight, when there is a break between the police shifts, they are to go to the hospital and find the target. They will go after this incompetent, but this time he doesn't want any innocent to get hurt. In other words, no one else is to be put in danger, like she did last time. She says he could have texted that, but he reminds her that he doesn't have her number. But looking at her with a cold expression, he says he doesn't want to because he doesn't want to jinx himself. Despite that, he writes down the exorcist colleague's number in his phone. But teasing the girl, he says he will delete the contact as soon as they complete the mission. The plan is simple. As soon as they arrive at the hospital, his uncle will distract the security guards. And in the meantime, he will use his energy to turn off the security cameras and enter the room where the target is. The idea is to lure the spirit to a place with as few people as possible and get rid of it. He says it sounds easy enough, and she somewhat agrees. Pungrim heard from his uncle that the incompetent isn't as hostile as his name suggests. To be honest, the boy thinks it would be easier to do everything alone, but then So-mang would complain again. The two argue about him looking at her and thinking about how useless she might be on this mission. She doesn't understand how two people from the same family can be so different since his uncle is so nice. So how can that kind man have such a grumpy and annoying nephew? She asks him to be a little kinder to his uncle because when he went to the bathroom at the cafe, the man almost cried. Pungrim asks her to stop talking, as he only met the man for one day, so he can't know much about him. To poke at the girl's self-esteem, he asks if she is so clueless not only in hunting but also in interpersonal relationships. The nurse interrupts their acidic conversation asking if they could return to their rooms. Both feel embarrassed by the situation and leave the infirmary with a blank expression. They are worried that the nurse overheard everything they were saying. Pungrim then arranges to meet at 10 p.m. and continues on his way, but she asks him to wait. So-mang doesn't understand how she can be nice and take care of such a pain in the neck like him. As if he had heard the girl's words, the protagonist's uncle says he has no idea either. His coworker asks if something is bothering him, and then he notices on his friend's phone that the nephew hasn't replied to any of the messages or returned the calls. He asks Leit if they haven't met recently, and since they are family, why is he acting this way? But the police officer explains that it seems their relationship worsened during their last meeting. They didn't discuss any heavy topics, so Leit's coworker thinks he is simply hated by his nephew. This leaves the police officer outraged, and he starts hitting his coworker with pieces of paper. But to try to help, the man says he should understand his nephew's needs, and he suggests that Leit take Pungrim to an amusement park. He explains that it is a place very loved by students, and you can see many in uniform at these parks. Leit can imagine his nephew with a softened heart and very excited in a place like that. And in his imagination, he sees himself as a caring uncle who says he earns money every day just to entertain his beloved nephew. The daydream ends with him seeing his nephew asking for churros and the two walking hand in hand, super friends. After all this imagination, the uncle seems quite excited about the upcoming plans. He hops out, thinking that the idea of the park was great, but his coworker continues. The man steps away before hearing the last piece of advice, which is to leave the park as soon as he buys the ticket. But even so, he hopes his friend will manage, and then he returns to the work topic. Leit mentions that she is improving and can even take a walk alone now. It can still be a bit concerning to let her go out, but it is somewhat of a relief. She is usually surrounded by other people there, and he believes she has already made friends, but we can see a disturbing scene of the spirit gathering several patients on the roof. This malevolent spirit is gigantic and seems very strong. It has marks on its arm that resemble paintings, but these paintings transform into things that look like moving eyes. The time to put the plan into action has arrived. Night falls at the city hospital. Checking the time, it is already 10 p.m., exactly the right moment. Leit arrives at the agreed location a little late and apologizes. So-mang is excited and says that working at night is cool and sophisticated. The police officer explains that he has already dealt with the guards, and they can proceed, just being careful with the cameras. But before the young people start their work, he asks Pungrim to be careful. The boy looks at him with a serious expression and asks what he is worried about. He asks his uncle to stay back and not increase the number of targets for the spirit. So-mang can't help but notice how the boy is always insensitive and cruel with his words, while the uncle is just being kind. She stares at the protagonist with a strange smile, and he asks why she smiles so much. The waiting room is empty, probably due to the hour. Pungrim activates his ability with his foot on the ground, and a shadow grows on the floor, spreading rapidly throughout the place. This shadow manages to cover all the security cameras on the floor. He warns that hospitals are full of people with high levels of helplessness, so they need to hurry before the spirit gains strength. Their fourth target is room 614. So-mang is impressed with the boy's energy. She had heard about this before, but she didn't imagine it would be so much energy. In some rare cases, exorcists can possess two energies, but she thought that was just a rumor. But Pundrim possesses yin, yang, earth, and gold. She can see this with her own eyes. She is amazed that such a case exists. Even in the association, she had never heard of one. As they go up to another floor, she wonders if he really isn't part of any association. How can someone with such talent not be part of one? The girl is so lost in her thoughts that she doesn't look ahead and bumps into Pundrim. She curses at him, warning him not to stop like that. But Pundrim noticed that their target's room has its door open. This could be a bad sign, so the two run towards the room. And the place is empty, not a sign of the woman they are looking for. Both are quite worried. Leit had checked earlier and seen that she was sleeping. Due to the temperature of the blanket, she may have left recently. The boy says that if she left the hospital, her uncle will know. Since they are in a hurry, they decide to split up to search for the spirit. They agree that as soon as one of them finds it, they will call the other immediately. Pundrim silently hopes to find the spirit first. He knows it's much easier to defeat the target if no one else is in the way. Running through the hospital corridors, he knows this method is the most efficient. The boy passes by a corridor and observes the room next door. At the reception, he sees a man in hospital pajamas walking like a zombie. He is not the target he is looking for, but he is acting very strangely. The protagonist wonders how it is possible that he has the same symptoms as the target. So it's quite possible that there are two targets at the same time. He decides to silently follow the man, passing through the doors of the place. But something shocking appears when he turns a corner. More than 10 patients are acting that way, walking like a horde of zombies. It's the first time he sees so many targets of a single spirit. The question that remains is where they are going. They are all going up the stairs. Looking at a sign on the wall, he understands that they are heading towards the exit. It's the exit that leads to the hospital roof. And while our protagonist reads the sign, a woman is falling from the top right next to him. He remembers a conversation he had with Gwak Yu-ryung about the forces of spirits. The man asks him which spirits he fears the most. Pundrim imagines a gigantic spirit and says it's the big ones. But Yu-ryung explains that the ones they need to pay more attention to are the emotional ones because they spread very quickly. Since emotions are not limited to just one person, Pundrim was extremely quick and managed to catch the girl who fell in time. He pulls her through the window and brings her back into the hospital. It was by a narrow margin. The boy is panting. After witnessing this scene, he has no doubt that they are in great danger. If the spirit manages to reach all these targets, they will all jump off the roof. So first, he needs to block their path quickly. He uses his ability to create a large barrier at the door leading to the top. But the patients begin to lean out of the window he broke to save the girl. Poor Pundrim runs to stop them, holding on to their pajamas. But while he is busy holding two, a third one prepares to hit him with a chair. And it strikes the poor protagonist right on the back of the neck. That blow was precise and hurt. Now he has a bruised face and is very angry. In a surge of rage, he grabs his sword and starts to draw it from its sheath. But he doesn't have much time to complete an attack as some patients approach. All of them have an extremely sad expression. It even tugs at the heart. Pundrim notices the expressions of the people and becomes thoughtful. He closes his eyes, decides to take a deep breath, and tries to be more patient. His sword suddenly falls to the ground. More people approach. One of the patients grabs him by the neck and pushes him against the wall with force. He forgot that he is only strong against spirits, but since they are humans, he doesn't have much strength. A feeling of frustration floods his body, and he begins to feel disheartened. The image of his father comes to his memory. He starts to think that he won't be able to do it. While he is restrained by some people, other patients begin to climb through the window. He sees that scene, and his eyes widen. By analyzing the feelings he is experiencing, he realizes that the target of the feeling of incompetence is not those patients jumping, but rather himself, who is feeling completely incompetent right now. The boy then begins to concentrate and think about everything he is feeling, but a girl's voice interrupts his thoughts. So-mang complains that they agreed to call as soon as one of them found it, and calls him stubborn. But while she manages to save two patients, she asks who is saying he is useless. The girl manages to bring some patients back on her back and says that Pundrim is not useless, just a coward. With all her charm, she approaches the patient holding the protagonist and asks him to let him go. She holds him by the neck and asks that from now on they resolve things with words. Looking at Pundrim, she asks him to tie that guy up as quickly as possible. The exorcist uses his ability to create a vine to restrain the patient. Everyone is trapped and safe and will remain in quarantine until the spirit's effect passes. Pundrim asks So-mang why she looks so smug. Feeling self-important, She says that if it weren't for her, there would have been true chaos and asks if he has nothing to say. Brave, the boy asks what she wants him to say, after all, and raising her voice with a firm posture, she wants him to ask for her help. He looks indifferent, but she says she honestly knows that sometimes she can be clumsy. But she is a true exorcist, and with so many targets, he won't be able to handle everything alone. He agrees, and suddenly she changes her expression, looking at the boy, incredulous. And in a burst of honesty, he admits that he underestimated her, and that he really needs her now. This is so surprising that she becomes suspicious that he has been replaced by an imposter. From an exorcist's perspective, they must always try to save as many lives as they can. Putting her hand on her chin, the girl says he is right about that. And then the protagonist states that there is one important thing she can do. The door leading to the hospital roof opens. The malevolent spirit is in a fetal position, but it is enormous. It has already managed to take control of several patients there, who have vacant stares. So-mang is impressed by how many people are there, and Pundrim tells her to remember what he said. She smiles and agrees but thinks she could never forget such an absurd plan. Pundrim wraps some logs around his body and talks about the energy of wood. It is the most suitable when it comes to restraining someone. He knows there are more people on the roof because the girl in the photo is not among those present. The wood will be used to restrain the patients, but while he does this, he cannot move. So So-mang will have to take the initiative and deal with the incompetent. She is a bit worried about having to do this alone. Pundrim tells her to stay calm because this spirit is not that strong. It only influences people and leaves everything to its targets. He may have gained a lot of power because the hospital really had many people for him to brainwash. But he asserts that exorcists are much harder to influence than normal people. So as long as the girl keeps her head in the right place, nothing bad will happen. The two heroes are ready to face that threat. Those influenced patients sense the presence of the exorcists, and they all start to move like true zombies. They seem to want to protect their influencer at all costs. As planned, Pundrim crouches down and begins to use his wood energy ability. Several pieces of vine and wood start to spread out in the area, heading towards the people. They grab the patients by the torso, immobilizing them. Everyone there is contained and placed away from danger. The malevolent spirit does not move while its targets are lifted by the whips. Pundrim shouts the order to his partner, telling her to start acting. Even more vine whips appear from the ground. Meanwhile, So-mang leaps towards the spirit that is among its mental slaves. Jumping towards the monster, she tries to calm herself, thinking that despite its enormous size, its vision is poor. And if she can manage to kill that terrifying spirit once and for all, it would be a wonderful achievement for her exorcist career. But as she gets closer to the spirit, her confidence begins to waver. Ambiguous thoughts start to pass through her mind, fear of failure and times when she didn't succeed. As she approaches the enemy, the eye on her arm opens. And upon facing that giant eye, she feels something strange in her heart. A voice in her mind asks how there can be an exorcist in this world who is afraid of spirits. With her arms, she seems to try to shoo away those thoughts and voices, but they continue to torment her. The voice says it is sure that if she causes a great uproar and lets the spirits free again, the association wouldn't stay still. And the thoughts seem to take shape and grab her, saying that all that self-confidence is just a shield to hide behind. So-mang puts her hands over her ears, trying to ignore it at all costs. The voice insists on saying that she is useless. Pundrim shouts, asking what she is doing. The spirit is now standing and approaching her, ordering her to give up and repeatedly stating that she is useless. Gathering all the strength she has, So-mang denies all of that and prepares to throw a punch. She manages to align the thoughts that have taken shape, saying that she is not useless. Screaming, she asks what they know about her, and continues to destroy them. Furious, she says they are just talking nonsense, but a voice shouting her name brings the girl back to herself. The thoughts in humanoid forms now closely resemble the people she knows. They are her seniors, and they say she has no talent to be an exorcist. One of them asks if she could handle it if someone died because of her. Those words pierce the girl's heart like sharp knives, leaving her in shock. Pundrim tries to get her attention, saying she is just daydreaming. The patients being restrained start banging their heads against the vines holding them. This is not good. They are beginning to hurt themselves, and they have little time. The boy screams with all the strength of his lungs the name of his partner. He says that enemy is just a weakling, and she herself said she wanted to prove she is capable. And he adds that she is not weak. Because of this, he decided to trust her completely this time. The malevolent spirit is getting closer to the girl. Pundrim shouts for her not to let him down. So-mang, who had her hands on her face, pulls them away and starts to feel something strange. She begins to wonder what could be the reason for her obsession with achieving something. Her legs become wobbly, and without balance, she falls sitting on the ground. She does not understand why her thoughts are screaming so loudly. Leaning against the wall with her head down, the girl starts to think about why she wanted to become an exorcist. Her eyes are glazed over, devoid of shine, as if she is in great mental suffering. She cannot remember why she decided to be an exorcist. On a beautiful day, a woman talks to her husband about their daughter's brilliance. The couple, with their little girl, discusses her achievements, like always being first in class and also excelling in sports. But the man thinks it is an exaggeration. He heard about a child considered a genius who mastered 5 languages before the age of 10. Looking at his phone, he explains that it is not uncommon for parents to confuse their children with geniuses. The woman loses her temper and says she also wants to enjoy the advantages of having a talented child. But while the couple argues, a strong wind passes by them and takes the man's cap away. The little girl with purple hair watches her father's cap flying away. Gathering her energy in her arms, she leans over the bridge railing. While holding onto the edge, she manages to catch the cap, leaving her parents speechless. With her little feet, she supports herself on the edge of the bridge. Looking at her father, she shows him the cap and warns that he dropped it. The two adults are incredulous at the little girl's display of skill. A news article shows a picture of the little girl hanging on and holding the cap. Someone says they will take down the article. An adult hand holds her little hand with energy and says that this is the golden ability of enhanced physical strength. A man with long hair looks at the little girl and says he is eager to see what will happen in the future. The parents are shocked and ask if their little girl is special, and the man confirms that she is. The man explains that he would like to ask her to start training with them at the association. But since the association is secret, they need to keep this information confidential. And then the little girl walks hand in hand with that long-haired man. Innocently, she plays with an action figure while walking. The man asks if So-mang likes heroes, and excitedly he tells her that he also likes them and that he is a defender of justice who saves people. He continues by saying that if she likes them so much, she should try to be one too. So-mang asks if she is capable of that, and the man says yes, he can see that in her future. She holds and waves a little white flag. In training, So-mang always came in first place. Even though she was small, she was extremely strong. Her opponents couldn't touch a single hair on her head. In races, she always finished first by a wide margin. The adults also showered her with praise, saying she was not like other children. Everyone was eager to see her grow up, believing she would be a great exorcist. The word genius had always been present in her upbringing. She was always praised. But in her memory, So-mang hears a voice calling her, sees an eye with several thorns and a tongue. That nightmarish vision seems like a true nightmare. A hand grabs her clothes and pulls her back, away from the creature. One of the girl's partners shouts that if she is going to be a hindrance, she should just stay seated in the corner. He heard she was a promising intern, but what good is that if she can't put her knowledge into practice? The girl looks at her hands and realizes she is trembling a lot. She can't believe she is in that situation, feeling powerless. A boy with blue hair is surrounded by trainers, all talking about him. That boy, only 15 years old, managed to capture 3 spirits with just one hand. But one boy says that not all new exorcists are like that. For example, So-mang, who is his age but is not talented. One of the trainers calls the girl over to talk and says he will be honest. He tells her that if she continues to perform this way, there is no reason for her to become an exorcist. She maintains a disheartened look, and the man asks if she would prefer to switch to a training group. And she ends up hearing from the trainers that they were mistaken about her, thinking she would be a prodigy. Totally defeated, So-mang begins to think that all that training has resulted in her actually being useless. And it is incredibly cruel to think of things that way. The girl is still backed against the wall, sitting with a vacant look. Pungrim continues shouting to get the girl's attention, saying that if she keeps this up, she will die. Looking at the girl like that, he wonders if her mind is being corrupted. Unfortunately, the protagonist will not be able to deal with the spirit while managing the patients. They are also starting to hurt themselves with the vines. He tries to think of what he can do, but while he is thinking of a way out, he loses focus, and one of the vines releases one of the patients. Pungrim realizes what has happened, and the woman who is freed begins to get up. She is still under the influence of the malevolent spirit. With a blank expression, So-mang looks in the direction of the patient who was released. They lock eyes, and the girl has a heart-wrenching look, her eyes filled with tears. This affects the girl a bit, and she starts to lose herself in other thoughts. She begins to remember a conversation at the association about why she wanted to become an exorcist. Her colleagues are chatting casually about their reasons, and one of them says it's because of the salary. He looks back and asks So-mang what her reason is. She is cuddling a character pillow and happily sucking on a lollipop. So-mang replies that it's because they said she is a prodigy at this. And she adds that prodigy heroes tend to be very strong and can save many people, and then also receive many compliments from those people. But So-mang's colleagues say that it's not necessary to be a genius to achieve those things. You just need to do your job well. Now the spirit is very close to So-mang and the patient, preparing an attack. and then she realizes that she was so focused on trying to achieve something that she forgot her main objective. With her arm charged with energy, she manages to block the enemy's attack. The girl thinks that she doesn't want to be just like her colleague Pungrim. Not everyone is born with that kind of talent. Even if it were offered to her to be like him, she wouldn't accept. Now the girl has come back to herself and is countering the spirit's advances, jumping to dodge. She prepares a kick with all her strength and determination. The kick is so powerful that it manages to rip the spirit's arm off in one go. So-mang smiles. Her expression has completely changed, and she comes to the conclusion that she only wants to be someone that people need. The malevolent spirit that just took the hit loses a bit of its balance. Meanwhile, several vines begin to surround it. Pungrim uses his energy to attack it as well and help his partner. He is trying to concentrate on several things at once. Since the enemy is completely surrounded, So-mang seizes the opportunity to go after it. She is confident and knows what she wants, even if she can't become the best exorcist. And with a powerful punch, she drives the enemy's head down with all her might. Its pseudo-face even ends up with a hole after that blow. So-mang's powerful punch creates an intense noise in the area. Losing balance, it falls backward completely. The girl adjusts her feet to finish the blow and secure herself on the ground. Gracefully, it lands and starts laughing as soon as it does. And jumping and celebrating, the girl shouts that she did it, while Pungrim frees the people who were trapped. She asks what the boy is doing and that she needs to report to the association how wonderful she was. The sun is already rising, and the malevolent spirit is disintegrating as the day begins to dawn. Comparing with the photo, the protagonist manages to find the girl they were looking for, and he realizes that he will need to go to school soon without even a moment to rest. But before he continues what he was doing, So-mang calls his attention. With a smug look, she says that she is not like him and thanks him for everything he did there. And then, a bit more seriously, she asks if what he said before was really true. That thing about her not being that weak or something like that. But making that usual indifferent face, Pungrim replies that no, it was a lie. So-mang is shocked, and he says that he has already finished everything he needed to do there, so he is leaving. She shouts for him to wait, and he ends up saying for them to try not to see each other for a while. Looking back before leaving, he says that now she can handle everything on her own. Pungrim jumps off the roof without any fear, and she leans over the railing to look. Seeing the boy walk away, she asks if this is just a thought in his head, or if it's for real. Back at Gwakyuryeong and Pungrim's house, the day is clear with some clouds in the sky. A book rests on a table. Someone was in the middle of reading. 2 days have passed since the incident at the hospital. The protagonist is enjoying a rare moment of peace, resting in his chair. Neither So-mang nor her uncle has looked for him so far, so everything is quiet and calm. He decides that this weekend he will dedicate himself to his studies. But before he could fully concentrate, the doorbell rings. He goes down the stairs while the doorbell rings insistently, wondering who it could be on a weekend morning. Hoping it's not another guest, he opens the door slowly. And So-mang surprises him, greeting him excitedly. The girl is holding a suitcase and everything, and says she is an affiliate of the Moonkeeper Association and has been assigned to train there. She seems to be a bit sleepy still, and upon opening her eyes and seeing who she is talking to, she pauses her speech. The boy is petrified after seeing who was at the door, and she asks what he is doing there. Yu-ryung seems to have been expecting her, and goes to the door to welcome her. Pungrim doesn't understand anything and asks his uncle what is happening there. The man explains that starting today he will have a colleague from the Exorcists Association. Since they are both the same age, he thought it would be a good idea, as being alone is terrible. He asks if he forgot to inform the boy about this, and Pungrim is already starting to get a stress-induced headache. This started 2 days ago at a meeting of the association. A man from the association reads a paper and says that this concerns the disciplinary deliberation regarding Lee So-mang's actions. A tribunal is taking place about the behaviors the girl exhibited that were against what the association allows. The man questions whether this is enough to strip the exorcist of her qualifications, but they decide to reduce the penalty to community service for the eradication of the spirit of incompetence. And she has also been ordered to transfer to the recovery department. She tries to appeal the decision, but the man says that this decision was made by the disciplinary committee. Desperate, the girl says that she did very well and that she will not cause any more accidents. She asks for another chance. With tears in her eyes, she tries in every way to maintain her position as an exorcist. Then suddenly, a friendly hand approaches her shoulder. Yu-ryung steps forward and says that it is not necessary to be so strict, as there is a shortage of exorcists these days. Everyone in the tribunal stands up to show respect and calls him master. So-mang seems to know that influential man in the association as well. She knows that he is one of the most skilled exorcists in the world. As he looks at her with a very friendly gaze, she wonders what someone like him is doing there at that moment. Then the man asks how old So-mang is. She says she is 18 years old, and he is happy to know this, saying that she is the same age as that person. Yu-ryung warns that he will take care of the girl and, as an exorcist, will also provide training for her. But the man explains that in any case, this student is dealing with a disciplinary action. Yu-ryung asks if she did anything against civilians or any such incident, because losing a talent over this could be very costly in the end. For what should be a priority for the association is to defeat as many spirits as possible. Furthermore, the recovery squad serves a place where those who have become unable to fight due to trauma or injuries live. And he adds that this young lady does not seem to fit those terms. Another man from the tribunal asks if the teacher is willing to do this. So it's fine. The man asks if there is anything specific he needs during this training period, and Yu-ryung says no. The man smiles and says he just needs a little financial help. Everyone thinks at the same time that this sounds quite strange. Back at Pungrim's house, he says that his uncle brought a new member into the house without consulting him first. And Yu-ryung ends the subject by saying that house belongs to him, and that even the police work in pairs. With his eyes burning with anger, Pungrim thinks that he should be the one to work with her. While having some tea, the man asks him not to be so angry. He needs to see her as a partner he can rely on. And as he tries to show the good sides of working in pairs, the boy realizes that he made quite a bit of money from it. So-mang adds that the master is right, and Pungrim asks since when he is her master. She asks if he is not too old to be called senior, and he says he is only 50 years old. Then Yu-ryung says that since they will be together from now on, it's better to stop arguing. And bringing the two young people together, he asks them to hold hands as a sign of camaraderie. So-mang looks into Pungrim's furious eyes and says that if he pushes a little harder, he will kill her. Wide-eyed as if he has lost all hope, he thinks of one thing. That now that he has hit rock bottom, nothing worse can happen. But before the boy could conclude his thoughts, his uncle Leit appears bringing some sweets as a reward for the last mission. Yu-ryung greets the man with a smile and says it's perfect timing. So-mang is also excited. With an expression of someone who would rather be dead, Pungrim just watches everything in silence. While the three chat casually, his headache begins to intensify. In a kind of garden, someone shouts the name Lee So-mang. The girl descends the stairs as the voice is calling for her immediately. The one calling the girl is Pungrim, who seems very angry and asks how many times he has to say for her to understand. Pointing to the sink full of dishes, he says she needs to wash the plates after eating. She explains that she was just resting a bit, and he asks if she hasn't rested for more than half the day. Still shouting, while she drinks milk straight from the carton, Pungrim tells her not to eat with the fridge open because it increases the electricity bill. While she is lying in the room, he comes in complaining about the trash and how her room is a mess. And he also shouts warning that she needs to remove her hair from the drain after showering because it clogs everything. So-mang can't take the shouting anymore and asks what evidence he has that the hair is hers. The boy holds a tuft of purple hair and asks if she is messing with him. The two fight like cat and mouse. Leit is present and asks Yu-ryung if it's okay for him not to say anything. And while eating the cookie the police officer brought for the kids, the exorcist says this is how young people make friends. But then a bottle that was part of the fight ends up spilling and flying into the man's head. The bottle flew with such force that it even caused a bump on his head. And that's it, that's the last straw. And he loses his patience, shouting for the two to stop. Now while giving a good lecture to the young people, he asks if it's right for two almost 19-year-olds to act like this. He adds that this way they won't be able to work together, and the next visitors will run away too. So-mang raises her hand and says she is curious about one thing. She asks if the visitors come directly to go to the exorcism temple. As the name suggests, the temple serves as a place for prayers and requests. But unlike the association, it operates independently and autonomously. They work together with the association but receive direct requests from clients, who frequently seek them out. In some cases, it may happen that the request has nothing to do with exorcisms or something like that. And while poking the cheek of the irritated one, Yu-ryung says it's not entirely unfounded. Before the clients visit the exorcism temple, they try every possible method. In the end, they end up resorting to this place as their last hope. Supernatural phenomena that escape people's understanding are usually treated as possessions. And lately it has served as a good source of knowledge and information. So-mang turns her attention to Pungrim, who has had a sour face since they started the topic. Yu-ryung decides to stop the explanation there, and says that the rest she will learn through daily practice. And coincidentally, there are clients coming to visit them soon. Pungrim is surprised by the speed. The man explains that the world must be going through some difficult time because occurrences have increased significantly. But anyway, he asks the two to try to reconcile and get along. So-mang confirms excitedly, and Pungrim just puts his hand on his face. The protagonist wonders why he should take on more work if it's not something he will resolve personally. Leit is returning to his job at the city police station. He climbs the stairs and continues on his way, passing by several people. And when he is checking his watch, someone calls him by name. It's his coworker who asks if he has finished his tasks for the day. Taking out his phone, the man asks what he wants to eat, and he replies that he wants fried rice. Then, when he takes off his jacket to feel more comfortable, he notices that his phone has a notification. It's messages from So-mang thanking him for the cookies and showing a picture of Go Pungrim enjoying them too. That image warms the heart of the doting uncle and makes him happy. She says that he always buys delicious things for them, so she is very grateful. His coworker asks why he looks like a divorced dad talking to the son of the mean woman who has custody. And then the nosy coworker manages to read the messages and sees the picture of the nephew, becoming very curious. When the guy asks how a gorilla could have such a cute nephew, Leit gets irritated. So after shaking off his coworker, he rushes to a mirror to see if his appearance resembles Pungrim's. The phone at the station rings, and Leit's coworker answers promptly. He says it's that person calling again and addresses the person on the other line as teacher, saying he shouldn't be making prank calls. Trying to be understanding, he says he knows he's not joking, but nightmares don't count for reports. But suggesting that he should look for a nearby police station, the person yells on the phone that he has already tried that. Leit approaches and asks what's going on and what that call was about. The man explains that someone has been making several reports of absurd things for a few days now. The person says he has been having the same dreams every night, and in the dream, someone is trying to kill themselves. It seems that the person harbors resentment and wants to seek revenge. Hearing this, Leit starts to sweat. His coworker continues saying that having recurring dreams is normal and could be memories of something impactful. But Leit asks him to try redialing the number that just called, right now. And the man picks up the phone and waits to see if someone answers. Apparently, now no one is answering the calls. Relaxing a bit, the coworker says it's just a prank, so Leit shouldn't worry so much. But worried, the officer thinks there's no guarantee that these things are false. And since he learned about the existence of these monsters and spirits, all his thoughts end up going in that direction. A man leaning on a table seems to be in a complicated situation. He slams his hand on the table and curses the police for not doing anything to help. Cursing them as bastards and incompetent, he throws everything off the table, making a huge mess. And after his outburst of anger, he says that at this point, that bastard will do something. The desperate man puts his hands on his face. His gaze is extremely frightened. Suddenly, his phone starts ringing. He answers promptly, shouting and asking what happened. The person on the other end says he should try going to a hospital first because these things don't make sense. And shouting at the person speaking to him, he asks if Nuna also thinks he's joking. With a lost and desperate look, he says that bastard definitely hired someone to kill him. Trembling and gritting his teeth, he can't take the tension anymore. He's at his limit. The person on the other end asks if the person he's referring to is his rookie in college, and that makes even less sense. He explains that the person he is referring to died 4 months ago. Then he paces back and forth in the room and asks him to give the address. The place is called Jiangwasa. The man writes down the address with his trembling hand. He has already made contact and asks him to try going to the hospital first, just as Nuna requested. On the paper, the man wrote the address of the exorcism temple located in Seoul. Biting his thumbnail, he feels tense reading that, wondering what it could mean. On his neck, there is a strange mark that seems to have been made with cuts. It is a starry night with a full moon. The sky is clear and bright. The room is a mess, papers, mugs, pens, everything scattered on the floor. Lying on the bed, the man is sleeping, immersed in his dreams. His hand starts to move, in unconscious spasms. He is sweating a lot, probably having a nightmare filled with agony. Calling out Seo Jin-young's name in his sleep, the man begins to move more. And not knowing for sure if he is asleep or awake, he sits up, putting his hand on his neck and screaming for help. Now he starts to writhe in agony, thrashing on the bed and clutching his neck with both hands. After squeezing his neck tightly, he releases it and begins to drool. Finally, he turns his head to the side, towards the window. At Pungrim's house, he asks if the client is unconscious. Yu Ryung confirms and says that he has also asked for help from the police. Leit shows the photo and explains that this time the victim is a 32-year-old man named Sang-woo. Suspecting something due to the lack of contact, the family went to visit him to see if everything was okay. But they said he had been sleeping for days and couldn't wake up at all. Normally, they would have suspected health issues, but due to the suspicious behaviors, they reported it again. It is very strange because the victim's physical health is perfect. He just keeps sleeping and won't wake up for anything. But Leit found an address on his desk. And then the officer calls his work friend, who is holding a folder. With a look of disgust, Leit explains that he insisted on coming and participating as well. Leit's partner gets all excited seeing exorcists for the first time, even asking to take a photo. He also asks if So-mang can guess what he is thinking just by looking at his face. Pungrim closes his eyes and puts his fingers on his head, concentrating. Leit ends up thinking that it might be true. And the boy says that now it seems like he is having a lot of highly unnecessary thoughts. The protagonist takes the folder of files and takes a look, thanking them for bringing it. But he says that no matter how much he looks, he can't see this case as being supernatural or having malevolent spirits. This information leaves Leit completely shocked, but he doesn't insist and just thanks them for the time they provided. Leit's partner is disappointed since they just arrived and didn't ask almost any questions. The two police officers are returning, passing through a very green, wooded area. Putting his hands behind his neck, the officer says that maybe they were nervous being in front of the police. Leit doesn't seem very calm. His partner says that even if he calls it a scam, that's fine, they are just words. So-mang is disappointed to end up without any work for now, as she thought it would be an opportunity to shine. Pungrim asks why she thinks she is without work. He sits on the floor and starts looking at the file folder. He explains that he only spoke that way because that is how he deals with supernatural things with normal people. And he ends by saying that she has no sense of subtlety or awareness, which irritates the girl quite a bit. Yoo-ryung also starts analyzing along with the boy, and they realize that it seems like the victim is trapped in a nightmare. He looks more closely at the photo that arrived and sees that there is a stigma engraved on the man's neck. The master exorcist says that apparently, this seems to be the work of guilt, after all. So-mang's eyes widen, and she asks who or what this guilt is. It extracts buried memories and infiltrates dreams, feeding on the target's guilt. It is a malevolent spirit. When the target finally reaches their limit and renounces everything in their life, then they end up dying, both in dreams and in reality. The complicated part is that this spirit can only be captured in dreams, and dreams are a domain. Even renowned exorcists have become its victims, and for inexperienced ones like them, it will be even more challenging. Knowing this, Yoo-ryung says that Pungrim doesn't have to accept this job, and he ends by saying that the boy must understand well what he means by that. The protagonist walks out the door and says he needs to think about it for a while. So-mang doesn't quite understand the boy's actions and asks if he is serious. Yoo-ryung asks the girl what she thinks about the motivations of an exorcist. With a sparkle in her eyes, she says it's a sense of justice and also a bit of ambition for glory. The man states that it often involves a sense of justice, seeking honor, and a desire for recognition. But in Pungrim's case, he is purely driven by a sense of guilt. That information impresses So-mang, who widens his eyes trying to understand. And Yoo-ryung continues, saying that guilt is not a feeling Pungrim is ready to handle. It's as if he becomes small again. His feelings about his childhood are very mixed. Knowing this, for him to face that malevolent spirit blindly will not be an easy task. The day is already ending, and the sky is turning orange as the sun sets. Pungrim is sitting under a rock, watching the sunset and lost in his thoughts. He looks at his hand. On his wrist, he always wears a little red string. Thoughtfully, he observes that little string with his mind racing. But someone interrupts his thoughts, suddenly calling him. It's Yoo-ryung down there calling the boy to come in, as the temperature is dropping. The boy doesn't respond, and then his uncle asks if he needs more time to think. Approaching, the man says that he used to say he didn't want to be an exorcist, but now he seems to have developed a great sense of professionalism. Yoo-ryung adds that if he doesn't take some action, people will be sacrificed again, and that if he doesn't accept the job, other exorcists will, knowing that saying this makes the proposal sound unappealing. Most exorcists know they are much weaker than Pungrim, but he shouldn't believe that only absolute power defines strength. Skills and accumulated experience also count, and all exorcists know there should be no room for underestimation. Pungrim looks at his uncle with an expressionless gaze, and as he stands up, the boy says he has already made a decision about what to do. Looking at his uncle, he says he will never again yield to malevolent spirits. Smiling proudly, Yoo-ryung says he figured he would say that. So-mang appears wearing a cooking apron and says dinner is ready. But when they come to eat, it looks more like a dreadful mess full of all sorts of things. And staring at that horrendous thing, Pungrim asks if it wasn't his uncle's turn to cook. The girl doesn't let their reaction discourage her, and says it may look ugly, but it tastes good. Pungrim says labeling this as food seems to lack conscience. She gets irritated, and the master says he will eat. He says he will be very honest about the taste of the food, and the protagonist still can't believe he will have the courage. While holding a spoonful without taking the smile off his face, he wonders to make sure he won't die. But a few moments later, he is lying in bed with a cloth on his face. So-mang feels terrible and apologizes to the master, while Pungrim orders chicken for delivery. A bag of fluid is slowly dripping liquid in a silent room. The man lying in bed has been sleeping for many days and cannot wake up. A woman kindly approaches and uses a blanket to protect him from the cold. Sang-woo is already very weakened, thin, with dry lips and deep dark circles. The woman cannot hold back her tears as she looks at the poor young man. Another girl enters the room holding a basin. She approaches the lady who is crying and places her hand on her shoulder to comfort her. While wiping her tears, the woman asks if the inspector hasn't arrived yet. The girl says they are already on their way and tells her to try not to worry too much. While soaking a cloth in the basin, she says she tried to do what the hospital and police asked, but she doesn't know what else to do. She wipes the young man's face and asks if they are going to wait for the man to die to go after the culprit. Now with resentment in her eyes, she says she won't rest until the person who did this to Sang-woo is caught. The young girl clasps her hands, worried and very distressed about the situation. And then she asks if there really is any culprit in this story. She adds that the police told her he hadn't contacted anyone before, which makes his mother furious. The lady cannot believe her son would lie, and she starts to cry. Approaching her devastated mother, the girl tries to console her by saying she is very sorry. A car can be heard arriving, and she says it seems the detectives have arrived. The girl then decides to go open the door. She greets the visitors and speaks with the detective. Then the person at the door asks if she is part of Kim Sang-woo's family. It is Leit at the door, accompanied by the whole group. He apologizes for being late. The girl seems somewhat confused as she looks at the number of people there. Yoo-ryung interrupts the police officer and introduces himself as a former exorcist. He says that if it is alright with her, they will try to arrange treatment for Sang-woo. With a very worried and somewhat confused expression, the girl says yes. She explains that she contacted them at her brother's request but did not fully understand the situation. Her brother was not doing very well mentally, but she thinks it's amazing that the police sought out an exorcist. Leit senses the weight of the conversation as the girl says this is not a joke. The police officer says he has no words for this. And Yoo-ryung says if he has no words, then he can speak for himself. Asking for permission, he requests that she try to describe Sang-woo's condition as accurately as possible. Lowering her head, the girl says she thinks it is some rare disease with no known cause. The man then pieces it together, and says it is a condition that cannot be explained by modern medicine, and there are no other signs that it is indeed an unknown and mysterious illness. He then asks if, in that case, it wouldn't be smarter to use some different treatment. The girl does not seem convinced that this is the best path. She finds it absurd. Yoo-ryung asks if Sang-woo was always mentioning someone specific and was very afraid of being harmed. Now this surprises the girl, and she asks how he knows this. The master replies that he is an expert in this field. Extending his hand to the girl with a friendly smile, he asks her to believe him. The young man's mother then decides to give full permission for them to try. Even with her sister's disapproval, the mother says there is no other way. Several doctors and police have already tried everything. The lady also says that at this point, she will be happy with any possible improvement. Then, with a calm and confident expression, Yoo-ryung says he is determined. He asks Pundrim and So-mang to prepare. He also suggests that the relatives leave the room for a while. The effectiveness of the treatment decreases if many people are in the room, so it is better for them to wait outside. Both are quite worried and nervous, but they obey his order. As the young men approach the victim, Leit asks how they will eliminate the threat. They will enter the young man's dreams, the place where the malevolent spirit, guilt, has spread its wings. The master explains to the police officer that every human being possesses something called energy. Everyone is imbued with this energy, and an exorcist can embody the principles of yin, yang, and the 5 elements. So energy also includes consciousness, and the force that brings life to things and can move them. An exorcist can manipulate energy and consciousness, allowing them to remain aware in the dream world. Leit has a grim expression and crosses his arms, saying this sounds like a fairy tale. When exorcists sleep near the target, the physical and mental distance closes, so even in dreams, they can find the evil spirit. This requires immense concentration, so he is not sure if the young men will be able to do it. The police officer becomes upset about this, saying he should be sure. They argue, and the boys ask for silence. Now the room is quieter and more still. Only the ticking of the clock can be heard in the air. Leit realizes that 30 minutes have already passed since the boys began. Pundrim has entered a dream, and he now finds himself in front of a door with the number 303. Staring intently at that door, the protagonist begins to sweat. Hesitant, he starts to move slowly. Then he begins to call for his uncle, asking if he can hear him. Looking around, he notices a completely empty place and calls for So-mang as well. He realizes that he may have been the only one to make the passage into the dream. The boy swallows hard at being alone in that place, with a powerful spirit on the loose. But he shakes his head and thinks he should not be worried. Since he has always worked alone, this time would be no different from what he is used to. He continues walking to see if he finds anything different. No matter how much he walks, he always ends up stopping in front of that door that seems to invite him to enter. Pundrim stands still, watching the door, unsure if it is safe or some kind of trap. He closes his eyes, trying to concentrate, thinking about what he should do now. Then he decides that he will open the door and see what is inside after all. The boy places his hand on the doorknob, thinking that if this is a trap, he has no other option anyway. He opens the door very slowly and carefully, and something catches his attention as soon as he realizes what the door was hiding. An infinite maze of stairs stretching out of sight. As he observes that strange place, he feels something odd. A gust that feels like wind, but different, hits him. Pungrim can feel the energy of the target there, stirring the air. This malevolent spirit attracts people using dreams they frequently have. The place has various random elements, and the boy wonders if he makes people his targets one by one. He then decides to jump from the staircase he is on. The boy knows he has no time to waste, as if he continues like this, the guilt will become very strong. So he starts to think about how many targets he has hunted up to that moment. He remembers when he studied with So-mang and saw that there is a true appearance of guilt. In the book they are reading, there is an image that was captured by an exorcist. It is not an appearance that commands much respect, and it is only the size of 2 fingers. It takes the form of a creature resembling a little lizard, absorbing the guilt of its target, growing in size. This appearance in the book is how it looks when it still doesn't have much power, so they need to capture it before it grows. Pungrim asks his uncle when this photo was taken, and with a sarcastic smile, he tells him it was 13 years ago. The boys are worried about all this time, and Uriung says that is why he insisted so much. At the present moment, it is unknown how much the guilt has already grown, making it even harder to ensure safety. And if Pungrim decides to proceed with the case, he needs to consider the worst possible scenario. Remembering this advice from his uncle and master, he reaches another part of the place after the jump, and then he observes where he has ended up this time. Pungrim can identify the location as an empty classroom, but a loud noise catches his attention, and he looks back. And he can see 2 men fighting. One of them kicks the other, who falls to the ground on his back. The man who kicked calls the other Seo Jin-young and says he only gave a simple task that the other couldn't complete. Bending down, the aggressor asks how he plans to compensate him for making him miss the lesson. Seo Jin-young apologizes and says he ended up falling asleep before the deadline for submission. The boy tries to say that he will explain to the teacher, but the aggressor doesn't let it slide and punches him right in the face. After that, he walks away as if nothing happened, leaving the poor guy there, fallen and hurt. He passes by Pungrim, saying that he still wasted time hanging out with that loser. The protagonist turns to observe the poor Jin-young, but the scene quickly changes. And now he can see some men talking and having fun. The man who just assaulted Jin-young is hugging a friend who asks if it's okay to treat a newbie that way, and he says yes because that is his freshman. A car appears, and the man says his ride has arrived. He quickly opens the door and gets into the car. Feeling at ease, he says that thanks to Jin-young, these days he has been so comfortable that he didn't even need to call for a substitute. The driver seems a bit shy, and he continues saying that the driver is doing very well, just listening to what he has to say. And if it continues like this, he will help the boy get an internship at his father's company. The boy thanks Sangwoo with a smile. Then Sangwoo takes out his phone and starts checking his social media. Pungrim is watching the scene, sitting in the passenger seat, and the man asks to grab a hangover remedy on the way. He is disappointed to realize that he is risking his life for a person like him, but he needs to stop the guilt anyway. But suddenly, he is teleported to another location that looks like a house. The boy looks out the window but hears someone talking nearby. The person is on the phone saying the name Sangwoo Sunbae. Sangwoo asks if he woke him up, but getting out of bed quickly, he says he was already getting up anyway. On the phone, Sangwoo says he wants to go to a place, and since he parked the car in the public parking lot, the boy should bring it to him. It's raining heavily, but the young man does exactly what his colleague asked and is taking the car. The boy is extremely sleepy while driving, his head even drops a few times. But then, startled, he snaps back to reality and tries to shake off the drowsiness. He knows that if he ends up being late, he will get scolded, so he needs to pull himself together. His phone starts ringing. It seems Sangwoo is already rushing him, but when he tries to grab the phone, it slips from his hand and falls. After searching under the seat, he manages to find it and answers Sangwoo. He explains that it's raining a lot and the road is slippery, so he can't go any faster. But not paying attention to the steering wheel, the boy doesn't notice that a truck is approaching. Still talking on the phone, he says he's almost there and hasn't noticed the truck's proximity. When he realizes, it's already too late. The gigantic truck collides with the side of the car, right on the driver's side. Pungrim prefers to look away and not see that scene, which was surely very intense. The scene is truly shocking. The driver tries to provide assistance, but the injuries seem to be severe. The truck driver screams in desperation that he doesn't know what to do and that he will call for emergency help. But the scene is interrupted by a loud scream of agony that draws attention. Looking to the side, the protagonist realizes that Sangwoo is there, kneeling and desperate. He puts his hands on his head and begs to stop dreaming that nightmare. Devastated, Sangwoo is there kneeling with his hands on his face, asking to stop having this dream. He cries so much that his face is completely wet, and he says he has already apologized several times. Sangwoo says that this will never happen again and begs once more for it to stop. As he is the target, He is trapped in those memories that keep repeating. Pungrim crouches down to talk to the man, calls his name, and tells him to get out of there. The exorcist shouts that they don't have much time, and he could end up dying if he stays there. Sangwoo doesn't seem to be in his right mind. He keeps apologizing repeatedly. Now looking up, the man says he knows he is going to die. This impresses Pungrim, and then he asks if this way is good for Jin Young. The protagonist feels a disturbing chill at that moment. In the end, the target has reached his limit to the point of starting to renounce everything, both in dreams and in real life. Pungrim can see Jin Young all injured there, standing, looking at Sangwoo. His eyes are black, and arms begin to emerge from inside his body. It's as if he were just a puppet that is now gaining extra limbs on his back. And then the malevolent spirit reveals itself, emerging from Jin Young's body. It is gigantic, with several arms and an anatomy similar to a centaur. The arms reach out toward Pungrim, trying to grab him, and guilt seems to have swallowed him, pulling him toward a pseudo-mouth of that horrendous creature. The silence of the place is broken by a piercing scream from the protagonist. He falls onto a lawn, still intact and apparently uninjured. Putting his hand on his head, very confused, he wonders what happened. Looking around, he realizes he is in a place that resembles a forest and wonders if he was swallowed by guilt. That place doesn't seem like an outdoor area. Everything feels very strange. He looks up at the sky and can even see birds flying. The ground now seems to be made of stone and very firm. He gets up and is now in a place with a waterfall and a river flowing, looking absolutely normal. But now the boy completely changes his expression and notices something. He begins to realize that he knows where he is, buried in his deepest memories, something he wouldn't be able to forget even on the day he dies. A feminine voice calls his name, a girl asking where he went while moving the bags. She tells him to stop playing around because now they are going to eat, and finds a sneaker. Then the girl approaches a bush and looks more closely behind it. The girl's expression changes radically. Her eyes widen, and she seems worried. Desperate, she drops her bag on the ground and starts moving toward the boy. Pungrim is all injured, crying and clinging to the arm of someone unconscious on the ground. The woman lets out a deafening scream upon seeing that scene. It's a scene worthy of a horror movie. She covers her eyes and starts to cry. The real Pungrim is there, observing that memory. That vision causes him immense anxiety. He starts to hyperventilate and sweat profusely. But suddenly he is teleported to another location, which seems to be a funeral parlor. Upon arrival, he hears a voice asking if Hayyang's son is still awake. A woman whispers to a man who has always made sinister sounds even on normal days, and that something is very strange. There are several people in the room, and the woman says he keeps telling nonsensical stories about how his father was killed by a monster. She says that the naughty little boy is trying to mess with the adults. Pungrim puts his hands on his head, screaming for it to stop. Then another sound catches his attention. He looks up, startled. It is his uncle, who is among the people, with his back to him, glancing sideways. Pungrim approaches him, shouting if he is going to turn his back on him again this time. He asks that at least the man give a reason and say what he did so wrong. Leit's expression is serious. He seems to feel absolutely nothing. Then he says that this is his memory, and he will not answer things he does not know. But he asks if he is so innocent, then why does he carry so much guilt? His uncle's eyes turn black and lifeless, and he says that Pungrim should know this more than anyone. And finally, he turns his back and walks away, disappearing among the other people in the place. Yu Ryung's voice catches the boy's attention. It is the memory of when they met. The man says he must have suffered a lot for being born so extraordinary. But the little boy has a very sad face and is looking down. Yu Ryung speaks a little louder to get the little boy's attention. And placing his hands on his hips, he asks how long he will keep his head down for something that was not his fault. He invites him to come with him, saying he will no longer be defenseless against these monsters. Young Pungrim's eyes fill with tears. The master tells him he will teach him everything. That was the second hope. Little Pungrim hugs his new uncle, who receives him with affection. Pungrim observes that memory. Uncle Yuling did not lie, as he taught everything he knew. He begins to think that the real problem there is himself. Now we see the master exorcist holding Pungrim's hand, with his mother in front. They arrive at the man's house. He shows him the place, and he holds his small hands, teaching him the things he knows. Pungrim thinks that if he had managed to learn things faster, and apparently he had a bit of difficulty mastering the techniques at first, if he had adapted to the power faster, since at that time he trained a lot by stacking pebbles, and also trying to control the roots and vines of the trees. An older person's hand gently strokes his head, surprising him. It is his uncle, who is being very affectionate with him, encouraging him. The two are always together. He is always supporting little Pungrim. But suddenly, Yu Ryung seems to be worried about something. They are in a dark forest, and some shining little eyes appear behind the trees. Yu Ryung hugs the little boy tightly. He seems very scared. He thinks he wouldn't have lost the second chance with foolish actions, and Yu-ryung is gravely injured with a hole in his back. Now they are in a bed. The little boy cries while the man is bandaged, recovering. Pungrim is immersed in guilt. The uncle explains that when he grows up, he will teach him a way to rid himself of his powers and no longer be an exorcist. He knows that without powers, there are no great responsibilities. Lost in thought, he believes that without justification, he is a coward who can't even run away. He can't even save the people who are important to him. If that is the case, then he has no right to save others he doesn't even know. In the real world, Pungrim is lying in bed next to Sangwoo. One can notice a dark aura around him. He does not seem well. Pungrim is visibly suffering. Black smoke begins to come out of his mouth. He starts to cough a lot, and his uncle and So-mang become very worried seeing that. The two approach him, trying to call him to wake up. Desperate, Leit starts asking Yu-ryung why he is in that state. The light-haired man says that this means Pungrim has not yet managed to overcome his guilt, and the sense of guilt in the boy is manifesting as negative energy. However, this scale of guilt has grown significantly. If it consumes him, he will no longer be able to wake up. The police officer is astonished by the possibility that even just sleeping can be so dangerous. Yu-ryung says that the term lucid dream can end up being quite confusing. Now Pungrim is in a state very close to astral projection, where he transmits almost all his energy to the dream, and he asks how to battle a malevolent spirit with just his consciousness. Yu-ryung's calmness irritates Leit, who confronts him and asks how he let this happen if it was so dangerous. The master exorcist says that what is happening now is really confusing, as the boy has already put himself in very dangerous and questionable situations. And even in those situations, he didn't wait for help. He also explains that he and So-mang tried to enter the dream to support him, but somehow it was completely impossible. Leit turns to So-mang now, and she confirms this with immense sadness. And as she approaches the sleeping boy, she says that this time it seems like something is intentionally blocking the progress. Yu-ryung rests his chin on his hand thoughtfully, and says that this must be the work of guilt, which noticed the exorcists and blocked the passage. The boy's uncle is frustrated at having to settle for just watching while his nephew suffers, but the master exorcist seems to have a trick up his sleeve and says there might be a way. Despite the low success rate, Leit asks him to do something to help. The light-haired man imagines how agonized the uncle must be to help his nephew in that situation. And then, after observing the scene, he suggests that Leit enter the dream himself. This surprises the young man greatly, who widens his eyes. Guilt is more powerful since there is interference from an exorcist, but an ordinary person will not be noticed by the spirit. So Leit can enter and rescue the poor, frighten Pungrim more easily. The police officer's mind is racing. He certainly did not receive training for this in the academy. But in the end, he agrees to help, lies down next to Pungrim, and asks what he needs to do. Yu-ryung says he just needs to lie down next to him and to stay calm. But if he can't, the three of them won't be able to wake up anymore. Even with that frightening information, he concentrates, trying not to worry. Since he has Pungrim's lineage, there is an innate but dormant energy within him. The exorcist places his hand on his forehead and says he will manipulate the energy, so he needs to keep his mouth and eyes closed. Leit thinks that looking like this, the man seems very much like a fraud, but he starts to try to concentrate and count backward from 10. Still a bit nervous, he begins to count while sweat drips from his face. He tries to relax his hand and muscles, seeking to loosen up as much as possible. And while counting the number 6, he begins to feel his soul leave his body. But before he could fly like in an astral projection, he ends up falling. On his back on the ground, he feels his body very different from normal. Still incredulous, he looks at his own hands, realizing that he has truly entered now. He pinches his own cheek to see if there is any difference, but it is quite similar to real life, only the location has changed. Straightening his posture, he decides to look for Pungrim now, before it is too late. But looking around, he realizes how gigantic that place is and starts to think about where to begin the search. Not wasting any time, he starts running in various directions. The man reaches a door and decides to open it. He observes carefully and calls out his nephew's name. Apparently it is a large, empty room, without furniture or anything similar. Moving to another room, he opens another door, but there is no sign of Pungrim. As he walks through that strange place, he wonders how many doors there must be there. If he continues searching randomly like this, he will take a lifetime to find him. But while he runs down a corridor, something catches his attention. It seems to be a hall completely wrapped in giant rolls of film. That peculiar thing interests him, and he approaches to observe better. Leit brings his face closer to one of the parts of the film to try to see. Very slowly, he brings his hand to that roll, and now he can hear a familiar voice calling. The film seems to move. He can see the image of a young Pungrim crying and saying that his uncle knows he is not like that, and asking for help. Now the little boy screams, asking to be left behind. That scene shocks the police officer. In the movie, he sees the older man leaving the little boy alone, these are his memories. He is facing the wall, not looking back. But he seems to be feeling some negative emotion. He lowers his head, and suddenly, he punches the wall with all his might. Trembling, the man thinks he is a pathetic bastard. Leaning against the wall, he feels useless, swept away by the environment, and thinks that his brother, now in paradise, must be laughing at him, and that the little boy was scared because of monsters or something like that. He starts smoking a cigarette, thinking that the people in the house were all hostile, even his sister-in-law. Looking at the sky, the man wonders what is happening with Pungrim now. With a dead look, his thoughts are racing, trying to understand the situation. Suddenly, his expression changes, and he thinks that there is no one else, so he will take care of this. Extinguishing the cigarette on the wall, he thinks that someone always stayed with him even in normal times, after admitting it was a mistake. Even if it is just the two of them now, they will be together, and he will never get hurt again. Then Leit returns to the place where his nephew was, his brother's wake, and his expression changes. He becomes worried when he can no longer find his nephew. He asks his mother where his sister-in-law and Pungrim are. The woman is clutching a photo of his brother. Not getting any answer, he asks again, but it is already too late. Leit approaches his grieving mother and asks where Pungrim is. The woman looks at him with a completely hopeless gaze, holding her son's photo. Angrily, she shouts that he must have run away with his mother. The woman believes that everything that happened to her son was because of Pungrim, and seems to harbor hatred for him. There, in the middle of the wake, Leit realizes that he has made a decision too late. He believes that if he had found Pungrim at that moment, a sincere apology would have made a difference. But that did not happen, and he knows it was his fault and his delay. The man observes that sad scene, his mother suffering from the death of her brother, and then he decides that now his priority will be to uncover his brother's death. As a police officer and also as a brother, this will be his greatest goal and responsibility. Now Leit is adjusting his tie, wearing his police uniform. From that moment on, he managed to advance in rank, pursuing the whereabouts of his brother's killer. But in any case, dealing with a case that was closed without resolution, while being alone was not an easy task, and even investing a lot of time, he could not find any satisfactory leads. As a result, the task of finding Pungrim again was postponed until it happened on that fateful day, and in a rather clumsy manner. Faced with the growing guilt, Leit simply sought to evade, and that is how this dilemma unfolded. Trying to resolve the injustice of the murdered, he forgot to pay attention to the person who survived, and he ended up losing precious and important moments with his family, growing increasingly distant, until forming an abyss between the two. Leit says that originally, after capturing the culprit, he really wanted to talk to Pungrim. Then they could be together to escape those painful emotions. But he made no progress in his investigation and thought that looking for his nephew in that situation was shameful. A strange noise in the hall interrupts all the nostalgia of the police officer, and someone approaches him. He continues saying that all of this may sound like excuses. While swallowing hard, Leit has already realized who is approaching him. He slowly raises his hand and says he can say one thing with complete certainty. Pungrim approaches him, surrounded by a huge malevolent entity. Leit confirms that he has never forgotten his nephew in his life. The boy has a completely different look, his eyes black. That scene leaves the police officer very worried. He tries to get closer to his nephew, but a dark aura of energy hits him, throwing him back. The energy now grips him as if it were a giant hand, pulling him closer to Pungrim. The two are now very close to each other, and Pungrim says that 13 years have passed. A time when even family becomes nothing, and a time he wishes with all his might to forget. The boy asks if he thinks those words can erase this, and if they can make everything that happens simply disappear. Looking coldly directly into his uncle's eyes, he says that it is like a stigma. His father died because of him, and his mother abandoned him, and even his uncle abandoned him. Now on the protagonist's neck, it is possible to see the same mark that was on Sang-woo. Upon seeing that mark, Leit falls into despair and shouts to his nephew that it was an accident. He tries to warn his nephew that all of this happened because of a malevolent spirit, but the boy is completely consumed by the dark energy, and says that those are just excuses. And pushing his uncle with the dark aura, he says that if he had awakened his powers earlier, or rather, if he hadn't pretended not to see what he had seen from the beginning, things wouldn't have happened as they did. And knowing this, even the adults who took care of him began to hate him. He tells his uncle that he knows it was all his fault. Leit shouts that this is nonsense. While crying black tears, Pungrim looks at his uncle and asks if he also hates him. The boy says that in reality, like other adults, he is resentful. Those words cut to the heart of his uncle, who closes his eyes thoughtfully. Then he raises his head and asks if the boy thinks all adults are perfectly mature, and that when you turn 20, some people believe you become a different person. Smiling, Leit says that adults also make mistakes and misjudgments. Sometimes they can be even more foolish than the young, but because they are adults, they have to deal with the responsibilities of those mistakes. Even if he is not worthy of it, and everything that happened are irreparable mistakes. He has the responsibility to take care of Pungrim, and also of the consequences of his actions. The boy hears that confession and widens his eyes, which are still shedding black tears. He begins to think about those words and reflects deeply. Instead of comforting him, his heart, flooded with hurt, only becomes more wounded, as he believes they are lies. The boy's uncle shouts his name, trying to bring him back to reality. Pungrim says that since he was a child, he never thought his uncle was perfect. Leit looks at him, realizing all the resentment and negative feelings he carries. But a very loud noise interrupts the conversation between uncle and nephew. A stone barrier rises near them. The black energy that held Leit releases him, and Pungrim seems to have come back to himself, asking his uncle to stay close. That energy that also held Pungrim seems to be releasing. The policeman asks if he is okay. The protagonist begins to free himself from the force that was holding him, and now changing the color of his clothes and acquiring a red horn, he says he has gathered the mental strength to face guilt head-on. Leit is impressed by what he sees. He widens his eyes and cannot hold back a scream. The monster is gigantic and bizarre. The man says he never imagined there was such a formidable malevolent spirit. Pungrim explains that he wasn't so powerful originally, but this is the magnitude of his own guilt. The creature is bizarre and seems very strong. It looks like a horse mixed with a lion and some human arms. Pungrim thinks that probably there hasn't been a day in his life that he managed to overcome it. Drawing his sword from its sheath, he positions himself and thinks that at least now, he is no longer afraid of this enormous guilt before him. His eyes are steady and confident. Guilt has been his inseparable companion for a long, long time. Our protagonist stands firm and courageous before that enormous malevolent spirit. He looks back and makes a motion with his hand in the direction of his uncle. That motion creates a kind of cage made of energy, trapping the man. He asks his uncle to stay there because if he is harmed by guilt, he won't remain unscathed in the real world. While holding the bars of his prison, the man screams asking if there is no countermeasure for this. Pungrim asks if he has ever heard of yin-yang energy. They are opposing energies that constitute all things, light and darkness, high and low, and conscious and unconscious. The essence of the spirit is very close to this field of yin energy, and what he can most easily manipulate is yin energy. This place is the realm of the unconscious. They have to determine the outcome based on whether it is yin energy or something else. The uncle asks if this isn't a purely advantageous fight for the spirit. Without looking at Leit, Pungrim asks what he means. He firmly faces the creature and says that fighting with physical strength is indeed his specialty. The creature finally begins to move, interrupting the conversation between the two. It strikes several blows with its pseudo-human arms in the direction of Pungrim. That mass of arms forms a barrier that pins the protagonist to the ground. But instead of giving up, the boy begins to move to free himself from that trap. And with the movement of his arms, he manages to break free from that restraint. Then he seizes the moment and leaps. This is when he manages to control the rising energy. He is now higher than the beast itself, and with a magnificent jump, he manages to sever some of its arms. This is an opportunity to use a more powerful yin energy than before. And with his sword imbued with black energy, he strikes the spirit. The creature endures the attacks and ends up losing its balance a bit, leaning backward. It is falling. One can see that it has lost some limbs after Pungrim's attacks, but from one of its orifices that would be its head, it begins to emit a different energy. Like a hose, the orifice starts to absorb the black energy. Leit, still trapped, observes everything and realizes that the spirit has inhaled the energy. And with that, it begins to grow in size. He wonders if this method is really safe after all. Pungrim remains focused on the battle, his eyes fixed on the enemy. He prepares a few more strikes with his sword, launching them toward the spirit. But the guilt has now managed to regenerate its arms and is absorbing energy with its head. Then the protagonist returns to the ground, positioning himself at a safe distance. He plants his sword in the ground with both hands. With this, a gigantic yin energy bursts forth from the sword striking to the ground, rising up. It forms a straight trail of black aura that extends toward the enemy. But Pungrim is surprised by one of the creature's arms that reaches his face. This arm manages to hit him with a blow that sends him flying away. He crashes into the wall with force. His uncle desperately shouts his name. Leit is extremely worried. He looks at his nephew, trying to check if he is okay. But the boy is lying on the ground, and one of his arms has disappeared. However, Pungrim does not seem very concerned about that. He says he is fine. Since this is not his true physical form, he can regenerate the arm quickly. But Leit asks him to stop using that method now. He says that these things are only feeding the spirit, but Pungrim asks him to just watch, because he is confident and knows that it will work out in the end. The boy does not give up. He gets up and returns to the battle despite his uncle's pleas. He approaches the spirit and shouts to get its attention. And without any fear, he asks if it is still hungry. preparing the next energy attacks. He says he will serve it, so it should not waste anything and eat everything. The protagonist is enveloped in a black aura, full of energy, the malevolent spirit right in front of him. The energy approaches the creature's head, just like in the last times. There is so much energy that it ends up enveloping the spirit's enormous body. Those movements create a gust of wind. Leit needs to hold on even while being trapped. He tries to open his eyes to analyze what is happening. For some reason, the creature is growing more slowly than before, as if it is already full. Impressed, the police officer seems to have understood what is happening. He wonders if his intuition is correct and if his nephew is acting deliberately. Perhaps he intends to feed the malevolent spirit to the point that it dies from absorbing too much energy. Pungrim continues to send energy toward the gigantic enemy. Leit is astonished. He had not thought of this plan. The spirit, even full, continues to absorb all that energy, no matter how much it has already sucked. And then something begins to happen inside it. It moves in a strange way. It is as if it is thrashing about or suffering in some way. It lets out a bizarre noise, and one can notice cracks forming on the creature's body, until the moment it reaches its limit and finally ruptures, exploding. At the exact moment of the explosion, Leit wakes up in shock. So-mang and Yu-ryung are nearby and notice that he has awakened. The girl approaches the police officer and asks if he is okay. He has returned safely. The man places his hand on his head and says he is fine but asks about Pungrim. The boy is still lying on the bed and begins to cough. He coughs a few times until he manages to expel a black mass from his mouth. It is the guilt, now in its minimal stage, so small that it could fit in a hand. And that is what happens. Yu-ryung immediately grabs it while it is still in the air. The exorcist realizes that it is indeed a great power and that the mission has now been accomplished. Pungrim then manages to wake up and gets up. Leit thanks God that he has awakened. With tearful eyes, he smiles at his nephew and says he is very happy to see that he is alive. Pungrim observes his uncle's reaction, still returning to reality. But interrupting the meeting, the man lying next to the protagonist also begins to come back. He scratches his head, slowly getting up. And then, already sitting on the bed, he asks how long he has been sleeping. Sang-woo feels a strange sensation in his head and asks how long he has been sleeping. Everyone in the room is looking at him, people he doesn't even know. Shouting, the man asks who they are and what they are doing in his room. Pungrim asks his uncle to investigate this guy meticulously. Since guilt is the result of people's actions, this man wouldn't have become a target for no reason. Leit looks worriedly at his nephew and asks if he is still thinking this way. He explains to the man that he is not a victim, but an aggressor, and that everything happened because of the guilt of taking someone's life. Because in the end, people's sins come back to them. The police officer approaches Sang-woo's bed slowly, and asks him if he recognizes him, and that now he will be investigated as a suspect. First, they will reunite him with his family, and after his health improves, he will have to go to a police station. Sang-woo's sister and mother heard all the commotion and are already entering the room. His sister approaches violently, trying to hit him, but their mother asks her not to hit someone who has just woken up. The team of exorcists begins to leave the room. Leit observes that situation out of the corner of his eye. He makes a call on his cell phone to Detective Park, and he asks why he wasn't answering the phone. Park explains that it was Kim Sang-woo who filed the report at the police station. Everyone witnessed that. He talks about the late Mr. Jin-young, who recently died, and there had been threats and violence for several years. He also mentions that Sang-woo asked Jin-young to do something, and in that, the victim died in an accident, where the evidence was covered up. That leaves Leit impressed. Everything makes sense in his head now. Sang-woo's sister is furious, and she says she knew the car was sold, but then it was all a lie. His mother, however, still tries to protect him from his sister. Everyone from the exorcist team observes that scene. Leit says that Pungrim was right. All humans are destined to deal with the consequences of the mistakes they make, but one cannot argue in favor of punishing an innocent person. Pungrim's guilt is solely self-destruction, so he needs to try to stop punishing himself. The boy remains silent, thinking about what his uncle is saying. He asks what the problem is for his uncle, but addressing him in a less affectionate way. Then Leit asks him to call him uncle. But Yu-ryung interrupts that subject, saying she wants to celebrate their triumphant return. And smiling, he asks what they think about going out to dinner together. Pungrim approaches him and says he did nothing, but he explains that he was the support that stayed behind all along. Then the boy says he should pay for dinner, but he says it is the young one who should be willing to pay to celebrate the alive return. So Mang suggests they eat meat since it has been a while. Someone watches the group from afar. It is Detective Park, who has a strange and somewhat suspicious look. We are back at Pungrim's house, Yu-ryung, and So-mang. The room is being illuminated by natural light coming from the window. Pungrim gets up, waking from his rest. He slowly descends the stairs, still somewhat sleepy and yawning. So-mang is near the door, talking to Yu-ryung. He asks what is happening and where they are going on a weekend morning. The man explains that he was urgently called to the association in addition to having a report about feelings of guilt, so he may not return until night. He asks Pungrim not to cry in their absence, and to take the day to rest. The boy asks if he really thinks he would cry. Then he raises his hand to say goodbye, and the two leave. After a long time, Pungrim is really alone now. He closes his hand in celebration and thinks that the first true break has finally arrived. Then he quickly returns to his room, ready to carry out his postponed plans. Opening a book, he begins to study, enjoying the peace and tranquility of silence. Focused, he can savor every moment of that solitude. But for some reason, he is unable to concentrate on his studies. He finished his homework and wonders what he can do now. Incredibly, our protagonist, who loves being alone, is bored. He starts to think about what he can do now that he has free time. A woman alone in an alley says she was by herself, but she could hear footsteps behind her. It's a movie on TV, and Pungrim is watching the girl say she saw a sinister woman smiling when she looked back. But that movie is not interesting at all, and he grabs the remote to change the channel. Discouraged, he lies on his back and starts looking at the ceiling, feeling bored. The window is open, and a light breeze enters the room. The boy grabs a cloth and starts cleaning the window, wiping the frame. Then he takes the watering can and decides to water the little plants in the garden. Next, he carefully organizes his bookshelf. After all this, he checks the fridge to see what there is to eat. And then, upon opening the fridge, he notices something. It seems that all the food there has run out. There's only water and a small container. As the family has grown, it's normal for the food to run out faster, so he wonders if he should go to the market to buy something. The day is clear and beautiful, so Pungrim decides to go out. He walks through the streets towards a market or a small shop. The protagonist starts thinking about ingredients and recipes to make for the week. But a voice calling his name catches his attention. His friend with purple hair calls him, asking what's going on with him. Pungrim explains that he was going to the market to buy some things. His friend says he doesn't live around there but is heading to an internet cafe and asks if he wants to join him. Pungrim looks at his friend and ponders the invitation. He says he doesn't play any games, so he doesn't know if it would be a good idea. Surprised, his friend asks if he is really a young Korean, and he replies that, in fact, games don't suit him. Then he asks the protagonist what he does for fun. That seemingly simple question turns out to be quite complicated for the boy to answer, and instead of responding, he throws the same question back at his friend. This makes the boy smile, like a spark of hope for spending a good time with his friend. They go to an arcade filled with toys and gaming machines. Two frightening zombies appear on the screen. Our protagonist is firmly holding a toy gun from the arcade. He and his friend are playing the zombie game, both focused. The boy with purple hair is quite excited and gives directions and tips to Pungrim. But he notices that all the zombies on one side are already dead, and says he will take care of the ones on the other side. And before he could do anything, all the zombies have already been defeated and moved on to round 2. The two reach the boss of the round. The creature is gigantic and looks very strong. But the boy is confident because he is one of the best players of that game. After a while, all that confidence turns into disappointment. He can't believe that Pungrim has never played the game before. But the protagonist explains that it's not that he has never tried, it's just not his thing. His friend says he was expecting a reaction like a primitive person seeing fire for the first time. At the bowling alley, Pungrim is also doing great. He asks what they will do now, and his friend says he can do well in anything. He asks if there's really nothing he wants to do, as there must be something or maybe a hobby. Thinking about defeating malevolent spirits, he talks about defeating a gigantic monster, but his friend reminds him that he doesn't usually play. Then he thinks about cleaning the house or washing the dishes, and his friend asks if he is a housewife. Since he lives with his uncle, his friend suggests they go out together to have fun once in a while. But the protagonist explains that his uncle is always very busy. The boy asks if it's because of work. He says no, and he is quite curious to know what his uncle is doing going back and forth without working. The boy with purple hair punches a strength testing machine. He gets all excited because he realizes he achieved a better record than last time. And looking at Pungrim, he asks him to try too, so they can bet a tekbaki. Pungrim declines, and the friend teases him, asking if he lacks confidence in himself. And then, easily falling for the provocation, the protagonist throws a well-placed punch at the machine. But the record doesn't appear on the screen. The boy questions if it's some kind of error. Your friend says that the stance was great but the punch was very weak. But he doesn't need to be upset since it's just a joke. He says he will buy a tekbaki for him. But he doesn't realize that Pungrim actually broke the machine with the punch. To hide the art he just made, he stands in front of the machine and his friend asks if he isn't hungry. They decide to go eat. Two other young people approach the machine and see that a kind of tree has grown on it. The friends walk together down the street towards the restaurant. The boy with purple hair is animatedly talking to his friend. He talks about various different topics and Pungrim doesn't seem very engaged in the conversation. until something catches the boys' attention. They coincidentally found other people from the same school. The boys are a bit confused and say they even expected to see Lee Jae-hyun, but not Pungrim, since he always goes home early. Another boy comments that Pungrim is definitely an I when it comes to MBTI, meaning he is super introverted. They start commenting on various things about Pungrim's introverted and somewhat strange behavior, and he asks if they are cursing him. Jae-hyun asks if they are just messing around and if they want to eat tteokbokki with them, and they agree. Pungrim realizes that suddenly the party has doubled in size. But he notices that this isn't bad, since he always wanted to hang out with his classmates like this, relaxed at least once. With all these people talking, he doesn't even have time for disturbing thoughts. He wonders if this is what life is like for an ordinary student. While he is reflecting, a friend from the group calls his name. The boy asks if he heard the news about Kim Minjun from class 4. He is auditioning for a program, but before his friend finishes the sentence, he asks who that is. Everyone is impressed that he doesn't know the guy, since he is quite famous, and then they ask about another person he also doesn't know. Pungrim's classmates even suspect that he might be a spy for not knowing anyone, or that he really doesn't pay attention to his surroundings. The protagonist asks if he is obligated to know them. They deny it but are astonished. They comment that he is very different from everyone because he isn't interested in video games, doesn't play sports, and always goes straight home. This makes everyone think he is someone very different. Pungrim is left speechless by all these comments. He can't deny it. Jae-hyun interrupts the conversation since he is at the restaurant door waiting for them to enter. They go in and each chooses their seat. While one of them studies the menu as seriously as if it were a book, another complains that he is so hungry that his stomach hurts. Jae-hyun suggests they order several things since they are a group, and then split the bill. Everyone talks animatedly and casually. Pungrim drinks a glass of water while observing all of this. He notices that everyone is laughing and happy, even with simple everyday conversations. Everyone seems to be having a pleasant moment. He wonders if this is what it means to have fun. It definitely seems much more fun than capturing malevolent spirits, but it feels like there is a wall or something separating them. He wonders if his uncle and So-mang have already returned home, and thinks if Leit ended up going to the house and found it empty. The friend with purple hair interrupts Pungrim's daydream and asks what he is going to eat. He says it doesn't matter, and a friend suggests he order 2 servings of fries from there that are really good. This turns into a debate. Another one says it's better to order just one and some assorted snacks. After a while, it is starting to get a bit dark. The plates on the boys' table are already empty, and they are satisfied after filling their stomachs. Jae-hyun asks if they are going home now, and one says he needs to go. Another says he needs to go back to do homework. Another remembers that he also didn't do his homework, so they decide to leave. Pungrim is already making his way and one of his friends asks if he is going in that direction. They need to go the opposite way, so they say goodbye to him, all smiling. And then they also ask to repeat the outing more often since it was the first time they did this year. One of them says that studying too much makes the brain shrink, so they need to relax from time to time. Jae-hyun asks the protagonist if he has a crush on the girl who transferred recently. That question catches Pungrim off guard, and he starts thinking, trying to remember who that student might be. But when he realizes who they are talking about, he widens his eyes. Jae-hyun argues that he got her number from the infirmary, and that he is always kind to her and seems to speak with some affection. On top of that, recently some people saw him having a very discreet conversation with her on the stairs. Pungrim's aura becomes increasingly dark as they talk until the boys notice this and leave. Jae-hyun says goodbye to his friend, saying they will see each other again soon at school. Pungrim maintains his deadpan expression and also says goodbye. Then he turns to start his way back home. He thinks that despite being a bit awkward, the day was quite calm as he always wanted. It was a successful break. In any case, he is feeling a strange discomfort that he doesn't quite understand. But then he remembers that he forgot to do exactly what he left home to do, the grocery shopping. Pungrim arrives home after a long day. He asks his uncle if he is coming back now, mentioning that he has been out a lot lately. Yoo-ryung says he will have to leave again and only stop briefly to grab a few things. Lately, supernatural occurrences have been increasing exponentially. The association is currently in a state of emergency and will likely soon begin an analysis of the causes. The man asks the boy why he is eating that ramen again, since he heard that he had gone grocery shopping recently, but Pungrim prefers not to answer. It is almost time for So-mang to arrive, and they have something to discuss. The protagonist is already getting ready and asks if it is about work. Yoo-ryung says yes, that there is something he wants him to take care of. So-mang appears, looking apparently tired, and says she is starving. The light-haired man says she arrived just in time and asks her to sit down as well. He explains that there is something quite troubling among the recent discoveries of malevolent spirits. The name of the spirit is Obsession, and Yoo-ryung shows a photo of a young woman. They must wait until the exorcist chosen by the agency arrives, but the two are chosen to supervise and protect the target. Pundrim asks if it is really just to supervise and protect. The master says that if they can handle the exorcism as well, he would be relieved, but since the spirit is hiding, it wouldn't be easy. It's not that the spirit is absurdly strong. It's more a matter of alignment than strength. Since the association dispatched an elite member capable of dealing with obsession, they just need to wait for now. The previous mission is still ongoing. It will happen when the target's emotions reach their limit. And before concluding the topic, the master points out that if they happen to encounter obsession. But before he could finish the sentence, his phone rings, and he says he barely arrived and already has another call. He needs to leave quickly and gives the address of the target to the young people. The two boys say goodbye to the master. Pundrim tells him not to skip any meals. In the city, we can see many different buildings and apartments. So-mang and Pundrim walk together behind Building 103. After a brief walk, they arrive at their destination. The place where the target lives is a large, worn-out building that needs painting. So-mang says they were asked to wait on the first floor and asks if it's okay for them to go up. In any case, they block the front door to prepare in case the target moved. And there is also the risk of provoking the malevolent spirit if they get too close. Moreover, that is the only exit, so monitoring from there will be sufficient. Above all, they cannot stand out. So-mang finds that quite lonely. She leans against the wall, relaxing a bit. If it's just waiting, then this mission seems pretty easy. Showing her arm with energy to Pundrim, she says that this way her body will end up rusting. And she notices that he has a notepad and asks if he is studying even in this kind of situation. He explains that from now on it's good to be prepared for the final exams and asks her if she is studying for that. With a smile on her face, the girl says she is not good at studying. She asks how many hours have passed, and he says it has been 7 minutes. The two are leaning against the wall where they were ordered to stay until the other member arrives. But So-mang doesn't seem to be the type of girl who can stay still waiting, and she starts to move around. Some time has passed, and now she is crouched down using a stick to draw on the ground. To pass the time, they decide to play some games. Both of them are quite bored. But while they play, Pundrim notices something that catches his attention. He stands up and asks his friend to look in that direction. The target has emerged, walking right in front of them, and they wonder how this is possible. The person is walking somewhat unsteadily, with a vacant look. Pundrim already has experience with this and knows it was the work of a malevolent spirit. The door has indeed been completely smashed, and even the locks and padlocks have been broken. The target starts to run and Pundrim prepares to chase after her. The two boys decide to take action and go after the person who is fleeing. They use the walls of the adjacent building to cut through and run faster. The target is also very agile and manages to run from building to building. The movements of the malevolent spirit are much faster than Pundrim has heard. Since the spirit this time is related to obsession, perhaps the person is heading towards the object of such feelings. And if they find the person in the state she is in now, the day is already getting almost completely dark, and they end up arriving in a dark alley. A man is cornered in the alley, trembling and scared, and the woman asks why he doesn't love her. While looking at him with a sinister gaze, she says she treated him so well and desired him so much. She has a knife in her hand, and holding it, she says that even so, she cannot have him. So if that's the case, she prefers to die, and the woman raises the knife. The young men are watching that scene and both find it extremely repugnant. The woman runs towards her victim, and the boys decide to intervene before something worse happens. But as she is about to stab the person, she notices something. There is no one in the alley, just a wall and some abandoned objects. And then the exorcists manage to corner the girl, and she cannot escape. So-mang manages to be quite intimidating, asking what she is going to do now. Pundrim asks her not to speak like that because she sounds like a villain. The girl asks why the two are interrupting her, and what she did wrong. With an extremely sad look, she gazes at the young men. It is possible to see the malevolent spirit behind her, and she says that she only loved passionately and sincerely. The two exorcists are impressed by the size of that spirit. They are dumbfounded. It has a bizarre shape, as if it were an octopus, and the girl who is its target is now completely trapped inside it. The boys observe that bizarre creature, wondering if it is some kind of octopus, but something about that spirit is especially strange. So-mang says it is a bit early for it to start attacking, and Pundrim believes it is impossible that the association made a mistake. The boy positions himself for battle. A crack in the wall beside him starts making noise. His sword emerges from that crack and he grabs it. They decide to try to capture the spirit since it has appeared. The enemy begins to move, using its tentacles to support itself against the walls. Just like an octopus, underneath it has a sinister mouth that is approaching the heroes. Pundrim is ready for the fight. He makes a move with the sword, but ends up hitting a post that falls directly towards the creature. So-mang screams asking what he is doing. He says the alley is too narrow to use the sword. Now that he has a disadvantage, the boy is worried, thinking about what he can do, and then a thought comes to his mind. He wonders if that guy is chasing it. The creature doesn't seem to have been hurt by the falling post, and is already moving again. It pushes off the wall and prepares for another charge. So-mang steps in front, asks where and goes for the spirit's tentacle. She manages to hold on tightly to the tentacle it was using to attack, but she is caught off guard by a disgusting slime that comes out of that octopus. Besides being disgusting, the slime leaves a horrible sensation on her skin. She asks what that is. Pungrim is also having difficulty finding a position, as the entire enemy is very slippery. He remembers that his uncle mentioned something about elemental affinity, and wonders if it has to do with that. The octopus seems to have the advantage and begins to move its slimy arms again. It swings some tentacles towards So-mang and Pungrim, and manages to hit the girl squarely in the stomach, throwing her backward. The impact of the blow is so powerful that it makes noise and raises dust in the area. So-mang hit her back against the wall, and you can see that the blow was strong. She is almost losing consciousness. Placing her hand on her stomach, she tries to recover while Pungrim is worried about his partner. But as he gets distracted looking at her, the octopus takes the opportunity and grabs the boy's neck with one of its tentacles. And then it starts pulling him up, choking him so hard that he ends up dropping his sword. Pungrim is running out of options now. He tries to break free from that deadly embrace. So-mang is still on the ground feeling the pain from the blow she took, and she calls the enemy a coward. But then, looking at her body and smelling the substances the octopus left on her, she realizes something. While the boy is still entangled by the tentacle, she shouts to Pungrim that it's fire. The girl bravely gets up and says that the smell of this slippery substance, it is definitely oil, and she clenches her fist with her arm charged with energy. Pungrim questions this, and she says she is sure, and that there is no malevolent spirit in the world that doesn't have a weakness. She asks her partner if he can use fire too. While trying to free himself, he thinks that he has never really tried to use fire, but he begins to concentrate to try to use just enough not to burn the woman, and flames start to emerge from his body, burning the tentacle of that creature. In the reflection of pain, the spirit releases the boy, who falls still flaming. So-mang rushes over, asking if he is okay. He is no longer on fire. Pungrim looks back a bit disappointed because the fire attack was somewhat weak. The spirit is shaking its tentacle to extinguish the flame, but it doesn't seem very injured. And now, very angry, the creature releases a black substance in their direction. The two young people are hit by that substance, and realize how viscous and sticky it is. But apparently, that substance was meant to distract them. Pungrim shouts asking where the spirit is, and when he looks in the direction where the enemy was, it has simply disappeared. There is a sewer on the ground, and it managed to slide and squeeze into that space to escape. Pungrim tells them to go after it, but So-mang warns that it could be much deeper than it seems. The boy seems not to listen to her and follows the enemy's path. She decides to follow too, and upon reaching the bottom, she steps into the water. The girl catches his attention, saying that she knew he was in a hurry and all, but he needs to be more cautious. And then she looks at her partner, and realizes something. He is completely soaked and motionless, holding the sword. Twisting his clothes a bit, he says that this obsession spirit is really smart, since it deliberately lures them into very tight and narrow spaces, and now to protect itself from the fire weakness, it led them to a place with water. Pungrim is really furious, and says that it is playing with them shamelessly. As they walk, So-mang asks if they could use fire in this environment, and the boy says it would be difficult. Looking at his phone, he says that finding the spirit is the priority now, and especially trying to catch it and buy time. He sends a message saying that he found the spirit and is following it, and will send the location. The boys will need to trust the elite members while searching for the enemy. They continue walking for a while in that waterlogged terrain. Both are alert and looking around, searching for the spirit. When So-mang seems to notice something different, she points ahead and shouts for Pungrim to look in that direction. And right in front of them, it is possible to see a piece of the monster's tentacle lying on the ground. It even looks like an exotic dish. The spirit cut off a piece of the tentacle and fled like a lizard that drops its tail. Certainly, burning the enemy made a big difference, and it is great that they found its weakness. He is probably in a state of panic, so it will be easier to find him. They follow the path. But before they continue walking, So-mang seems a bit suspicious about something. Pungrim asks why she is always looking around like that. The girl says that something changed in the smell, but he says he smells sewage. She explains that it's not that, but a faint, sour smell that lingers in the air, and it is getting closer and closer to them. Now she is smelling it very strongly as if something is approaching. But with marvelous reflexes, the girl manages to defend herself from a blow that was coming straight at her. The two can hardly believe their eyes when they realize that So-mang is holding the spirit's tentacle. And there it is, all curled up in a corner of the sewer walls, with the tentacle stretched out. He was by their side the whole time, hidden and camouflaged. So-mang holds the creature's tentacle firmly, not believing it had been beside her all along. Pungrim asks if she has a dog's nose, since she can smell so well. The creature begins to disappear again, parts of its body seeming to become invisible. Pungrim asks if she will be able to find the enemy again by smell, and she says she will try. The girl closes her eyes to better concentrate on the smells in the area. She says it keeps moving back and forth a lot. Because of this, she starts to feel the scent coming from all directions. But finally, she manages to perceive something different and turns in a direction. It is coming from above, and she cannot warn in time before the creature attacks them. Pungrim is tense with the incoming attack. A man from the association places his hands on the table and asks if this is really true. He stands up and says it is not a mistake. That declaration is indeed true. The other members of the meeting become tense and talk among themselves, unable to believe it. Pointing to a document with a photo of a girl, he asks if they really found the origin. The photo shows a girl with long black hair, bangs, with her face partially covered. The girl explains that this is more of a confident assumption. It is a derived result based on the reports from the investigation team members. So far, the origin has been consistently revealed, but there have only been 2 documented cases of its discovery. All malevolent spirits always send chills down people's spines with their bizarre forms. One of the members says it is hard to be sure with this amount of evidence, and requests further investigations. The woman says that there is still no certainty, but they are planning to assign new investigators for additional inquiry. Despite this, the existing evidence is undeniable. Another man says that Mr. Kwok's opinion would be valuable on this matter, but he is just observing the documents and says nothing. And then he says that, as he mentioned before, he is being cautious in expressing his opinion at this moment. Placing the documents on the table, he says he prefers to observe a bit longer, and it is better not to meddle with unnecessary things involving strangers. Young says that ideally, the matter should remain confidential for now until they are certain. He stands up and begins to leave, saying that with a few exceptions, it is better to keep the exorcists unaware of this for now. Then he checks his phone to see if there are any new messages, and he mentions that he received an urgent message from his disciple. Meanwhile, Pungrim is trying to defend himself from the enemy octopus's attacks. He manipulates some roots and trees towards the spirit to block it. This somewhat delays the creature's advances. But since it has many tentacles, that is not enough to free him from the attacks. So-mang appears to support her partner, delivering a punch to the creature's body. With the impact of the blow, the spirit is thrown forward and bounces in the water several times. But So-mang explains that the punch doesn't seem to have much effect, as it feels like she is hitting a punching bag. Putting her hands on her head, she says this is really annoying, but getting angry doesn't help either. Pungrim says he has an idea, and the girl looks interested. The boy explains that it would be more of a gamble, but he asks if she has ever seen any videos about octopus fishing. Not understanding the reason for talking about octopus fishing now, she stares at him. But the protagonist explains the plan to her while the spirit moves along the walls, and then the girl catches its attention with a shout. So-mang drops down towards the octopus, ready to stomp on it. She is concentrating her strength in her lower limbs. The girl manages to land a strong kick right on the octopus's head. All the concentration paid off. Her strike was effective at that moment, and taking advantage of her proximity to the enemy, she also delivers a punch with her energy-charged arm. With tears in her eyes, she wonders if she is doing the right thing, if her superiors would find this impressive or over the line. The malevolent spirit senses a gap in So-mang's movements, and pulling its tentacles back, it begins to try to escape from the exorcist. The girl notices its movement and shouts, ordering it not to flee. But then the girl realizes that everything is going as they planned. The octopus is extremely fast, and has already managed to gain a good distance. And then it notices something that catches its attention. A perfect hiding spot made of wood. The creature quickly slides over to it, curling up in the space to protect itself. So-mang shouts to Pungrim that now is the time to act. And the boy, who is focused with his hands on the ground, prepares his energy and fills the burrow with branches. Everything went as they wanted. They managed to lead the octopus to the trap, and now it is contained. Pungrim says that octopuses like to hide in small places. Even though he is not a real octopus, this also applied to him. So-mang sits on the spot where the spirit is trapped, and says that what remains now is to wait for reinforcements. Breathing a sigh of relief, the girl says she was afraid of doing something she shouldn't. She doesn't want to get scolded anymore. But while the two are calm with their victory, they hear something dripping from the ceiling into the water on the ground. They both look up and start thinking exactly the same thing. Everything is strangely very quiet there. There was not even a sign of resistance from the spirit. Pungrim decides to release the wood to see what is happening, and the young exorcists realize that the enemy has opened a hole in the ground and escaped. But before they could feel indignant, the spirit is already right behind them. The exorcists sense its presence. Pungrim is outraged by this, and he can't help but let out a loud curse. But the enemy doesn't have time to reach the two. a blue lightning bolt strikes through the ceiling and his body. A lot of smoke rises, and Pundrim needs to put his arms in front of his face to defend himself. And when it starts to clear, he looks in the direction to understand what happened. Two beings that seem to be entities made of a blue element are holding the octopus. The protagonist is stunned seeing that the malevolent spirit is trapped. He observes more closely the being that is holding the enemy, and wonders if it could be fire. In that tense moment, the boy's cell phone starts to ring. Yu-ryung asks if the boy is okay, and he responds furiously, asking why he is only contacting him now. The man explains that he was stuck in the association meeting, but from his voice, he can tell that everything is fine. And in any case, he can relax now. Someone has arrived and is stepping on the body of the octopus. Yu-ryung says that they told him that person just arrived at the battle site right now. So-mang seems to recognize the person who just arrived. She approaches. The exorcist appears to be young like them, with sky blue hair and wearing a beaded necklace. The name of this boy is Hayyang. The exorcist who arrived sent by the association seems very powerful. His name is Hayyang. He has blue hair and wears a beaded necklace. The arriving exorcist holds the hand of the victim who was inside the body of the malevolent spirit, and he pulls her out forcefully. Her body comes out from inside the spirit. Now with the woman in his arms, he descends from atop the spirit, and he asks Agent Nara Yun to burn what is left of that creature. The octopus then becomes engulfed in blue flames, and its body begins to burn slowly. But it is still not dead, its eyes are moving. The malevolent spirit still has the strength to move its tentacles toward the exorcists. So-mang shouts that it is very stubborn and still moves even in this state. Without saying anything, Hayyang hands the spirit's victim to So-mang, and he begins to gather his power in the palm of his hand, looking at the stubborn octopus. With the blue flames, he manages to conjure a fire sword and cuts the spirit. The strike is powerful and manages to make a cut in the creature's body. After dealing with the spirit, So-mang and Pundrim stand there, staring at the scene in awe. With an arrogant air, he says it is pathetic to fight so hard against such a pathetic creature, and says they don't even look like disciples of Master Yu-ryung. And looking at them, he says they smell like weaklings. But not letting himself be discouraged by the comment, Pundrim says that this smell is from the sewer. Hayyang is one of the most acclaimed exorcists in the association. So-mang whispers to her partner that he is the same age as them, but his family has been producing skilled exorcists for several generations. She comments that he reminds her a bit of Pundrim, especially for being incredibly arrogant and annoying. This already makes the boy lose his temper, and he doesn't like the comparison, shouting back at So-mang. But then he starts to look more seriously at the boy and think about his abilities. The boy can manipulate the flames with great precision. There is no other word to describe it but genius. But more importantly, he needs to report quickly to his uncle, so he takes out his cell phone. And he notices something that makes him a bit tense. Your phone is no longer working, probably because it got soaked after the battle. Hayyang reaches out to him and asks him to hand over the phone. So he takes Pundrim's phone with both hands and concentrates a power that starts to heat the device. He returns the phone to the boy and says that when this happens, it just needs to dry a little. Pundrim is impressed, looking at the other boy and seeing that he is skilled in various areas. He then understands what it means to be someone from the elite, but So-mang retorts by asking if he is elite or just a hairdryer. With a disheartened look, the girl mentions the object of the girl's obsession. It was an anime character, and she is all happy with the new item of the character she loves. The two boys are heading back and comment that at least this time there were no casualties. But despite everything having gone well in the end, the two notice something strange, and they wonder why the other exorcist is still following them. But he says he is just going in the same direction as them. And then they realize that the place he is going is the exorcist temple, and now they are all together with Yu-ryung. Smiling, the master says that luckily he arrived at the right time since his disciples were having a moment of difficulty. Hayyang explains that as soon as the target was eliminated, the repair team went to fix the damaged sewer. And he didn't call the medical team because the boys said they were fine. So-mang confirms, saying she just needed a little ointment. Then the master observes that it seems they managed to handle the situation very well after all. Obsession is a complicated spirit to deal with, so it must have been quite difficult. Half annoyed, the girl says it was nothing special and asks if there is something they should pay attention to. And looking firmly at his master, Pundrim says that more important than anything, he asks why there are so many bags at the entrance of the room. Somewhat reluctantly, Yu-ryung is about to explain, but Hayyang says those are his luggage, and that now he has decided to undertake personal missions from now on at the Exorcist Temple. He adds that he is counting on them, and calls them little rascals. To top it off, Yu-ryung asks if they have formally introduced themselves to the new family member. Pundrim shouts. Scratching his ear, the boy says that the details of the mission cannot be shared with mere exorcists like them, but as soon as he finishes, he will leave. He himself does not plan to stay in a cramped and decaying place for long, So-mang says that such things are very rude to say. Pungrim approaches his master and asks how much he earned to accept this time. Uriung makes a sad face. Disappointed, he says he is already super overloaded and now with one more person in the house, his personal life will be a mess. Things like cleaning and cooking will be much more difficult, but Hayyang says he won't arrive at the house empty-handed. He explains that first of all, he will take care of his own food, clothes, and shelter, since he doesn't eat any kind of junk, and Pungrim gets even more irritated. And secondly, besides the mission, he will assist with the tasks of the exorcist temple. In other words, he will be taking care of the exorcisms on their behalf. So-mang starts to notice from Pungrim's body language that he is becoming restless. And finally, the boy lifts his shirt and takes out something he had hidden. He shows an envelope of money and says he will pay the rent. With his arms crossed, Pilgrim tells him that his uncle takes care of all that anyway. But the boy brings the envelope closer to the protagonist and says he will pay him directly. That attitude impresses Pungrim, who looks worried. Smiling, Uriung is also taken by surprise by that decision. Hayyang says that even if he is not the owner of the house, he is the one who handles all the household chores. So it is right that he receives the rent money directly. Tempted by that proposal, Pungrim says that if he wants, he can deal with all those parasites so they can have a more pleasant environment. Hayyang says that is not necessary, but there is indeed something he wants. He places his foot next to where the protagonist is sitting and says he heard that he is quite brilliant, but that he couldn't verify that in the incident with the obsession, so he wants a battle between the two to see with his own eyes. With all the emotion, but not really, Pungrim responds that he doesn't want to. He gets up and walks away, and Hayyang asks if he is scared, which is why he is running away. Pungrim just leaves, saying he will accept the money, and as he expected, exorcists are quite out of their minds. Pungrim is brushing his teeth. This is the first day since Hayyang arrived. The protagonist observes the boy leaning against the sofa, relaxing. On the second day, he was doing some push-ups in the garden. On the third day, he was training intently with his staff. Pungrim asks what he is doing after all, and Hayyang says he was called for that. The order is to wait until detailed instructions arrive. It's not that he is procrastinating, but it's part of the mission. Hayyang asks if it bothers him so much why they don't fight, but Pungrim never said he was bothered. So-mang approaches the protagonist and asks if the boy is doing that again, and she says that if he wants to fight so badly, she can accept the challenge. But with an arrogant look, the boy replies that he doesn't fight with weaklings. That leaves So-mang furious, but before she can say anything, her stomach speaks for her. She puts her hand on her belly and says that getting nervous makes her hungry. Pungrim says it's a bit early, but they can have dinner, and when she asks what there is to eat, he replies that it's something she doesn't like. Hayyang extends his hand towards the two, and they look at him confused. Then he asks Pungrim to hand him the apron, and the new resident of the house begins to show off his culinary skills. He skillfully manipulates the pot and the tools, with a confident look of someone who knows what they are doing. So-mang is impressed by the show of flames, and Pungrim asks if he isn't going to end up burning the kitchen. Then the meal is ready. He places the dish on the table, which has a great presentation. Then he says that's why he mentioned he doesn't eat just anything, and tells them to feel the gap that exists between them. So-mang tastes it, and says it's very delicious. Even though he is rude, it's impossible to deny that he cooks well. She comments that everything he has done so far has been to relax, so she didn't expect this, but he explains that it was part of the mission instructions. The boys become serious and ask him to talk about this so-called mission. Since he appeared out of nowhere, he at least owes them an explanation. With an angry expression, Hayyang says he won't tell them anything, especially since one of them isn't even part of the association. All that they low-level people need to do is not get in his way while he investigates the origin. Pungrim realizes he ended up saying something he perhaps shouldn't have and asks about the word origin. And Hayyang adds that they are investigating the reason why the appearances of spirits have been becoming more frequent lately. It's because there is some problem related to their origin. So-mang asks if spirits don't arise from people's feelings, and the boy says that's what most people think. But in reality, they only feed on emotions. The origin from where they were born is something separate. With his hands in his pockets, Hayyang thinks about what he just said, and suddenly he realizes he shouldn't be giving them this information like this. Then he starts shouting that it's all their fault for deceiving him. The two just watch. Then Pungrim reflects on what he just heard while eating. The origin would be an object or something like that, so he questions if the object is destroyed, do the spirits disappear too? He keeps taking spoonfuls of food almost without realizing it, lost in thought. And it seems Pungrim is thinking about interfering again, even though the job is for someone elite. But if he ends up solving this, it would indeed be quite an achievement. He wishes this ends soon so he can retire from this exorcist job before college. And before So-mang and Hayyang could notice, the boy had already finished all the food by himself. The day passes, and now we see the boy's school. The students complain, and today they will have a mock exam. Each one checks the sheet to see where they will take the test. While the students talk and discuss the exam, So-mang and Pungrim approach. The girl notices the chaos of the place since it's the mock exam for the third-year class. Someone calls out to the two, and they both look back to see who it is. He explains that today the third-year floor is off-limits to the other years. The two then go down the stairs and reflect that next year it will be their turn. But suddenly Pungrim stops going down the stairs and seems bothered. He says they start to appear around this time. But before he could finish his thought, a friend of Jaehyun shouts that Pungrim is with the girl transferred again. With mischievous looks, the two friends start teasing the pseudo-couple, saying that they were dodging so much, they looked like a Picasso painting. This leaves the boy furious, and So-mang confused. Many students experience strong emotions at this time of year, such as anxiety. As the entrance exam approaches, the last mock test greatly increased the anxiety of the third-year students. But it is hard to believe that a malevolent spirit wouldn't consider attacking such a conducive environment. So-mang asks Pungrim, since he has experience with this, what the spirit of anxiety is like. He explains that he first saw it when he entered high school, and luckily this spirit can only target one person at a time. Usually, it chooses the student who is the most anxious in the school, and Pungrim starts to think about the appearance of the spirit, which is different from the others. One could say it is actually quite cute, and So-mang can't believe she heard that word describing a spirit. The boy says that even if she doesn't believe it, that's the truth, but it's somewhat difficult to put into words. Then he starts trying to think of a way to describe it, but he can see a little creature at the window, and says it is the size of that little creature and looks very much like it. The two exorcists stand still for a moment digesting the information, and the little creature at the window seems to be making a suffering expression. So-mang and Pungrim still can't take any action while observing that, and only after a while do they realize they are facing the spirit of anxiety. Pungrim shouts for the girl to capture it, but the little creature is very quick and manages to escape. The two exorcists are desperately chasing the little creature that jumps and manages to flee from them. So-mang gains an advantage in the race and gets very close to the little creature. She stretches her arm to the limit she can handle, and finally manages to capture the spirit, holding it tightly in her hand. In her hand, the little creature seems to start melting and evaporating. She asks if it's over, but Pungrim says no. The little creature seems to have escaped. It runs behind So-mang's feet, and the boy explains the third characteristic of anxiety. It is that from its main body, the little creature has the ability to create an absurd number of clones, and suddenly we see one creature becoming two. Meanwhile, a student taking a test begins to feel the symptoms of anxiety. He thinks he heard that this mock test is exactly like the entrance exam, and starts to worry about what will happen if his grades don't improve. The anxieties begin to reproduce uncontrollably there in the location. Many anxious thoughts arise in the minds of the third-year students. Pungrim and So-mang start running towards the classrooms, but then the boy sees in the hallway that the division of the little creatures has already begun, and now there are many of them floating there. So-mang doesn't waste time and starts charging an attack. She strikes the anxieties with her blows, which disappear one by one. Pungrim also decides to act and charges in holding two daggers. He delivers several strikes to the little creatures that are being destroyed, and the numbers decrease. In the air, one can see various parts that have been cut from these spirits. However, within seconds the parts begin to regenerate and return to their original form. So-mang, worried, realizes that this seems to have no end. As soon as they capture one, another appears right after. When a student passes by them, both try to disguise it, as if nothing is happening there. Pungrim asks So-mang not to stop moving her hands because if they do, the school will be filled with anxiety, and they imagine an image of the school building completely dominated by that treacherous spirit. While still managing to chop up some little ones, she asks what they will do since class is about to start. Pungrim says he would like to call G1. But then they both stop for a moment, seeming to have the same idea at the same time. They remember that Hayyang exists, and that he could be of great help now. So quickly Pungrim grabs his phone and dials the boy's number. The exorcists press their ears to the phone waiting for a response. But there's no sign of being able to communicate with the blue-haired boy. After a few minutes, he answers, and Pungrim scolds him for taking so long. Hayyang says he was going to ignore the call but decided to answer and asks what's going on. The protagonist explains that the spirit of anxiety has appeared and they need assistance. But Hayyang says that it's small fry and they didn't need to have called him. Pungrim says that if he could handle that issue on his own, he wouldn't have called him from the start. But they need to attend classes, and there are many people at the school watching everything. Hayyang is training and says that since the order doesn't come from Kwak-Ryung, he doesn't have to comply. Then, with all the possible audacity, he says he will hang up. So-mang tells them to skip class that day since there's no other way out. Still on the phone, Pungrim, with a more serious voice, says he didn't want to resort to that. but then he asks Hayyang on the phone if he's feeling scared. That is quite effective for the boy's rampant pride, and he shouts back asking him to wait. Convinced, Pungrim says that was easy, and the boys head to their next class. As soon as the boy opens the classroom door, he sees a flood of various little spirits. The little creatures have already reached the second-year classrooms, and the boy tries to get rid of them as if swatting mosquitoes. His classmates watch that somewhat confused, and Jaehyun says it's better to be careful not to study too hard, or else you might end up like that. During the class, everything goes as it should. The students pay attention to the teacher. Pungrim does his assignments normally, like any other student, but he can't concentrate much. He thinks Hayyang should arrive at any moment. There are too many little creatures to handle alone, and if people notice, it will be a big headache. He wonders if he should watch a bit more of the class and go help him, but someone calls for him at the window. It's Hayyang, who says he took too long to find him and asks how many classrooms there are in that school. And holding the little creature with his fingertips, he asks if this is the anxiety he was talking about. He knew it was something small but finds it absurd for Pungrim to call for help over something like that. Speaking very softly while gesturing, Pungrim says he is crazy for being there at the window, but Hayyang can't hear and asks him to speak louder. The protagonist asks him to get out of there, and he asks why the boy keeps grumbling. But surprising the guy, several anxieties appear and fly in his direction. They pull him from the window, jumping all over him, and Pungrim gets startled. Then he stands up, and the teacher asks what the problem is. Shyly, the boy raises his hand calling for the teacher, and trying to simulate a headache, he says he doesn't feel well and asks if he can go to the infirmary. The teacher finds it a bit strange but allows him to go. Quickly, the boy starts running towards Hayyang. He kicks open one of the windows to reach the spot where the anxieties are attacking, and skillfully, he manages to jump through the window and keeps running. He asks if poor Hayyang is okay. He is overwhelmed by little anxieties covering his body, but gradually, one by one, they start to burn with his blue flame power. He says that even though there are many, weak ones are weak, so it's not a big problem. Pungrim then asks how he could be attacked and fall from the window, but Hayyang says he got distracted. A voice interrupts the conversation calling for both boys. It's So-mang, who is exhausted and says there's no time for playing around. In that short period, the spirits have doubled in number, and the third-year floor is already at its maximum capacity. From the window, you can see thousands of little creatures jumping and floating on that floor. The third-year floor is already crowded with many anxiety spirits jumping back and forth. Wherever you look, there is at least one of those little ones. The young people arrive on the floor, and even the ground is full of little creatures. So-mang shakes her foot to get rid of some and says that at this rate, the school will be infested in no time. She asks Pungrim if he knows where the true spirit's body might be, and he says it's tied to the most anxious student in the third year. While holding a little creature, the girl closes her eyes thinking and says the problem is knowing who that person would be. But while climbing the stairs, Hayyang says it's obvious it would be the best student in the school. Pungrim says that makes a lot of sense, and So-mang asks who the best student in the school will be. Tension usually correlates with how much effort a person puts into something. Being at the top makes people even more anxious because from there, you can only fall. So-mang seems impressed with Hayyang's reflection and thinks that only number one can understand how a number one thinks. Anyway, they don't know who this number one is, so they're back to square one. They also couldn't ask in the teacher's lounge because they're in class time. But then an idea comes to the girl's mind. She remembers that this is Pungrim's second time dealing with anxiety, and asks how he stopped it last time. He explains that last time it was on a smaller scale, but he didn't use a very good method. But So-mang says that it's still important to know, to have an idea of how to tackle the main body in such a situation. Pungrim looks at the girl with a serious expression and scratches his neck. While picking up a dagger, he says that anxiety is a spirit that only appears temporarily. Unless the number of units does not exceed a certain amount, the spirit disappears quickly. So until the exam causing the anxiety is over, they will need to reduce the number of little creatures as much as they can and endure. So-mang questions whether this is really possible, not just for a few minutes but for hours until it ends. Hayyang seems irritated and lets out a grunt, interrupting the conversation. Turning his back on the two, he says he's leaving and that he's never seen such ridiculous exorcism methods before. He doesn't want to waste his precious time there anymore, tells them to figure it out, and warns that he's leaving. So-mang is furious, but Pungrim puts his hand in front of her, stopping her. Then he tells Hayyang to go ahead and leave. They would then have no other choice. They will have to report to the association that he just revealed a secret mission to them. That blackmail hit Hayyang hard, causing him to stop walking and look at Pungrim. He says it's their fault for pressuring him, but Pungrim retorts that then he should answer everything the others ask. They are exorcists just like him, so they need to report what they heard to the association. And in a cold and dry voice, Pungrim and So-mang continue with the blackmail. Pungrim says that if he agrees to help a little, they can keep quiet, as good team members do. Not knowing how to act, Hayyang feels cornered in this situation. He shouts with all his might that they are cowardly weaklings. In a notebook, a part of the school building's map is drawn. The third year is where anxiety started, so he and Hayyang will deal with as many spirits as possible there, while So-mang handles the floors below. And of course, they need to make sure that no one else sees them. Hayyang starts running up the stairs quickly. Then he reaches a hallway on the third-year building. This hallway is lined with small spirits with sad faces. There are so many that they cluster together, forming real clouds of spirits. Due to the large number of individuals, they manage to unite and form something more frightening. But it's not enough to intimidate Hayyang, who forms his flame weapon, and he charges at the bizarre creature with all his courage. He throws the weapon at the creature and manages to hit it. That group of little creatures is then dissipated after the blow. Wiping his hands, Hayyang can't believe he's taking orders from a weakling. He can't believe he let the secret mission slip. That doesn't usually happen to him. If his father found out about this, he would be extremely disappointed. He needs to make sure that this never happens, so he continues eliminating the spirits on the floor. But while fulfilling his mission, he realizes that someone is there. It's two girls who are coming down the stairs, talking about causalities. The two are holding giant stacks of paper and passing by. Hayyang needs to keep quiet. He manages to be successful in this and goes unnoticed. Then the exorcist begins to scan the area, finding an open window. Hayyang can see a group of students playing soccer and discussing whether it was a foul. He hears one of them proposing a bet and having fun with it all. The boy closes his eyes, remembering his time in school. He lets slip the phrase that he thought it was a pretty boring place, and an old man appears behind him, talking about skipping classes. The old man asks which class he is in and why he is wandering the halls during exams. And after looking more closely at the boy, he realizes that he isn't even wearing a uniform. In another location, So-mang struggles to fulfill her mission of taking care of the other floor. She is eliminating the spirits one by one. There are so many repetitive movements that she is starting to feel pain in her back. But after a while of working, she managed to completely clear the lower floor. With that, they probably gained some time, and the boys should be taking care of the upper floor as well. But something catches the girl's attention, and she glances sideways to notice a situation. She sees Hayyang arguing with a school staff member. The girl tries to hide behind a trash can and asks why Hayyang is there. Desperate, she doesn't know how to act now. Soon after cleaning the floors, they were discovered. With his hands behind his back like a kid caught stealing, Hayyang says he is not a student at that school. The staff member is impressed by the awkward way the boy speaks. Moreover, he has the appearance of a delinquent, so it's hard to believe what he says. Asking him to tell the truth, the staff member shouts and claims he believes Hayyang skipped class to loiter around. Hayyang doesn't say anything more, just stretches out his hand and shows it to the man. The man is taken aback by the scene. His hands are all calloused and have burn marks. The man asks how he got all those marks. He asks if anyone bullied or assaulted him because those wounds don't look like they were caused by 1 or 2 accidents. In that case, they will need to report it to the police immediately. But while the man speaks, So-mang arrives in the room, opening the door. Smiling, she says it took her a while to find them, but that guy is her cousin. She explains that he came to school to deliver something she forgot, and there must have been some misunderstanding. The man asks if that's true, and an angry Hayyang says he has been saying from the beginning that he is not a student. Placing her hand on the boy's shoulder, So-mang asks if the teacher thinks he looks like someone who suffers from bullying. Now, about bullying others, she wouldn't doubt it. Crossing his arms, the man says she is right. She asks if they are done since she quickly stepped out in the middle of class and needs to return, and the teacher allows it. Then, before he can say anything else, So-mang grabs Hayyang, and they both rush out of the teacher's lounge. Relieved, the girl says that was close. Leaning toward Hayyang, she asks why it had to be that teacher of all people, but the boy says he didn't seem like a bad person. But she explains that he is one of the strictest in the school and that Hayyang shouldn't have been so oblivious to the problems they could have faced. The boy asks if this is the first or second time she has been misunderstood doing this, and that if he wanted recognition, he wouldn't be an exorcist. So-mang ponders this and agrees with the boy. She understands that he chose to do this to save people, but he remains silent, just looking at her. The two are now in an awkward moment of silence when Hayyang's phone rings. Upon answering, he hears Pungrim yelling on the other end, asking where he is and that he almost died dealing with the spirits alone. But he asks him to forget it, and come quickly to the third-year floor, bringing So-mang. Trying to speak more quietly so the students don't notice, he says there has been a change of plans. The exam seems to be tougher than expected, so anxiety has managed to grow dramatically, and soon they will be in a large enough number. They need to deal with this quickly. Hayyang says he knows this, and the two run out. A small group of students is talking inside the classroom. The girl talks about the difficulty of the test. They try to calm another girl who seems to be in bad shape. One of them says that since it's hard for everyone, the cutoff score will decrease. A girl with glasses approaches, saying she has a question that she's really worried about. The girl who was more concerned gets upset and thinks that for her, half of the test left her worried, and she couldn't solve everything in time. They comment on question 31, and they all say it was really difficult. And the girl with glasses adds that luckily, she managed to find the answer in the end. But each of them chose one of the alternatives, making it hard to know which one is correct. They fall silent for a few seconds, and the atmosphere in the room feels strange. In another room, something is wrong, and the air is heavy, and through the windows, a gigantic wave of anxious spirits begins to enter. The three exorcists are ready for the confrontation, and Pungrim asks them to prepare. Hayyang activates his ability, and his hair becomes fiery. He summons Miljiak and Nara Yun, and then he orders his creatures to clear the way. They pass through the cloud of creatures, destroying all that they touch. So-mang is right behind the boy and asks him to move, but he tells her not to give him orders. With her arms charged with energy, the girl attacks the little creatures one by one, and she manages to destroy a large number of them as she advances with her steps. Until at one moment she stops and sees a strange shadow on the ground. And suddenly she spots a different creature, much larger and more imposing than the anxieties she has seen. It seems to be a fusion of several anxieties that have combined their strengths into one body. Pungrim steps over the girl, ready for the attack. He has activated his energies and now has a pair of red horns. His eyes also turn yellow, and he is ready for the fight. With his sword, he delivers a blow that strikes the middle of that creature. Even having dealt with anxiety twice, this is new for him. Hayyang is also fighting with focus. It seems the enemy is no longer so weak, and So-mang is giving all his strength and dedication, as he usually does. The battle is tough, and the trio of exorcists is having a hard time. You can see the school building outside, and time is passing. So much so that now the sun is practically setting. The exam period has ended. Now the students are exhausted and are leaving the classrooms. One of the students asks who wants to compare answers with him, but the three boys are exhausted, like those who have returned from war. Despite their fatigue, they have succeeded in blocking the spirit for now, and in the end, they ended up skipping all the classes. So-mang says she had science class, and the image of the crazy teacher comes to Pungrim's mind. He wishes her luck. Hayyang starts to get up from the ground, calling them weaklings. He warns that he is leaving, and So-mang says he seems like a cold man leaving alone like that. Pungrim thanks him and says that thanks to him, they managed to get through anxiety safely again this year. The blue-haired boy does not look at him but responds to the thanks slightly. Then he continues on his way, passing through the hallways and hearing the students grumbling and complaining. Hayyang glances sideways and observes Pungrim again. He can see the boy socializing with a classmate, along with So-mang. The boy wonders why that guy, who seems to be able to enjoy everything, always acts as if he is suffering a lot. It is a new day at the city police station. Someone inside is humming while working. All the other employees look at that cheerful person with a certain disdain. The singer is carrying paperwork in one hand while murmuring a song. It is Leit, who seems to be in a very good mood that day, causing disapproving looks from his colleagues. The other employees comment that he seems to be in great spirits, considering that just a few days ago, he was all gloomy. Another man approaches and asks if it isn't his lunch break, and with a big cheerful smile, he greets the team leader. Then he says he is not hungry but tells the man to enjoy his meal. The station employees whisper among themselves, wondering what is going on. They decide to go eat, while Park is delivering coffee to another guy. Leit is all cheerful, looking at the computer screen, and Park looks in his direction. And before handing the coffee to the gentleman, he turns and heads toward his friend. Getting close to him, he calls out to the superintendent. Park approaches and asks if something is making Leit so happy. And with all the pride of a true proud uncle, the man says that it seems Pungrim is opening up a bit more lately. And whenever he sends a message, the boy responds. This is a great evolution in their relationship. Even if it's just a few words, it's already great compared to how it was at the beginning. The poor man is after his coffee. Someone interrupts their conversation, calling them. A nervous man approaches, saying they need to go to the crime scene now. They say a pawn shop in the city center has been robbed, and the suspect is still on the run. But the issue is that the method of robbery is similar to a series of robberies that the local station is investigating, and there have been fatalities in this case. If the suspect who is on the run is the same as in the other case, he needs to be captured. The case has been transferred to them, so they need to investigate the crime scene. The police officers head to the location where the robbery took place. They pass through the tape that cordoned off the area and thank the store employees for their cooperation. Leit approaches and sees the crime scene. He believes they robbed it in almost a spectacular way. A young man who works there says that according to witnesses, the suspect appears to be a man in his 20s and stole about 3 million wons. Leit asks to check the security cameras, and the man says he will take them there. Fortunately, there is a camera near a restaurant close to the crime scene, installed for monitoring illegal dumping. The camera managed to capture the culprit quite clearly. It is a man wearing a cap. Leit observes the young man's face, trying to figure something out about it. And then he notices something that makes him nervous, and he questions how no one noticed this. The thief is seen walking out of the store, and a huge shadow is behind him. It is so large that anyone can see it. Crossing his arms, the police officer wonders if that could be a spirit, but he thinks it's a bit early to judge. Since it is a serial thief, that would make a lot of sense. It could be a spirit like greed or something like that. And thinking about this, he remembers when Hayyang mentioned that he also had a dormant spiritual energy within him. So perhaps that immense strange shadow is only visible to him. Park notices that his partner is lost in thought and asks what the problem is, but he says it's nothing. The police officer takes out his phone and thinks that if there really is a spirit involved, he should contact his nephew Pungrim as soon as possible. But something makes him a bit worried. He starts to sweat. Leit knows that their relationship is starting to improve, and this might end up being a distraction. If he keeps wanting support from Pungrim all the time, he will become just another unbearable adult to him. The police officer stands up and thinks that whether it's a spirit or a human, he will solve the case himself. He tells Park that since the suspect's movements are being tracked, it's better to go immediately. The two police officers drive to the destination. They finally arrive at the location they needed. The security cameras captured the bandit at that location. His last direction was right there. Leit wonders if the thief escaped through the alley nearby. Park points to an object in the alley and asks his partner to look at it. He holds up a ring that was lying in the alley. It looks quite expensive. Park decides to keep it as evidence. Leit is looking at a wall in the alley, and his partner asks what he is doing. He observes the broken part of the wall and realizes it looks suspicious. Park asks if it could have been a car that crashed there, even though it is a very narrow alley. Leit asks if there are more cameras around, and there are indeed a few since the location is near an intersection, but the suspect was not seen by any others. He probably used a dry spot to escape or something like that. The police officer leans against the wall and says he might still be hiding nearby. Park is a bit worried about the way his partner is acting. He decides to be honest and tells his superintendent that he finds him a bit strange today, like a puppy that needs to go to the bathroom, and Leit is shocked by this impression from his friend. With a serious expression, Park asks if he has any suspicions, and now looking deep into his partner's eyes, he asks him to tell him what he is thinking. The man feels cornered, not knowing exactly what to say in this situation. Then he furrows his brow and knows he cannot fully open up about what he thinks to Park. So he says that even if he told him, his partner wouldn't understand. Park says he tried to hide it, but he was kind of expecting something. And clenching his hand, showing nervousness, the man says he will no longer pretend he doesn't know. That attitude from Park makes Leit nervous. He starts to stutter and asks what his partner means. And in a firm tone, he says he already knows. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.